Brandon Voss grabbed the 16-year-old by the collar, dragged him off the mat, and threw him into the wall like he was discarding equipment. "Get up," he said, "or get out." Noah Cole didn't make a sound. That was the part that destroyed Ethan. Not the throw, not the wall, not the way every other student in that room looked away like they'd seen it before. It was the silence. His son had stopped making sounds when he got hurt. Because somewhere in the last 4 months, Noah had learned that making sounds in this building made things worse. Ethan stood up from his chair. The room didn't know it yet, but the most dangerous man in that dojo had just run out of patience. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to see how this ends. The first punch landed wrong. Not on Ethan. Not on Brandon. It landed on Noah, a 16-year-old boy who had done nothing except show up to practice, try his hardest, and trust the wrong instructor. The sound wasn't loud. It was the kind of impact that gets lost inside the noise of a training session. Pads, slapping feet, shuffling on the mat, the low hum of a ceiling fan that never quite kept the room cool enough. Just one dull, terrible sound. And then the sound of a boy hitting the mat. And then silence. Noah Cole lay on the floor of the Black Eagle Martial Arts Academy, his left knee bent at an angle that knees were never meant to bend. His mouth was open. His eyes were wide. He wasn't crying yet. The pain hadn't fully arrived, not the real kind. Not the kind that breaks through shock and reaches the brain and tells you this is serious. But Ethan Cole, sitting on a folding metal chair along the wall with 3 other parents. One of them scrolling on her phone, one of them watching with casual interest. Ethan saw it happen. He saw all of it. He saw Brandon Voss, 28 years old, 4 national tournament titles, 3rd-degree black belt, and the kind of man who wore his ego the way other men wore cologne, heavy and impossible to ignore. He saw Brandon sweep Noah's leg after the round was supposed to stop. After the tap. After the whistle. Not an accident. A statement. Ethan stood up slowly. The other parents barely noticed. The students on the mat were frozen, watching their instructor to see how to react. 2 of the older boys were already looking away, which told Ethan everything he needed to know about what this place had become. "Walk it off," Brandon said loudly, standing over Noah, arms crossed. His voice carried the comfortable authority of someone who had never once been challenged in his own space. Pain is information. Your body's telling you you're not ready. You gotta be tougher than that. Noah pushed himself up on one elbow. His face was red. Not from embarrassment. Ethan knew his son's face better than he knew the back of his own hand, but from the effort of not breaking, of not letting himself cry in front of everyone. "I tapped," Noah said quietly. "What?" Brandon tilted his head like he hadn't heard correctly. "I said I tapped." Noah's voice was steadier than Ethan expected. "I tapped twice. You kept going." The room tensed. Brandon's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something cold. He looked down at Noah the way a man looks at something small that has just surprised him by making noise. "You tapped because you're weak," Brandon said. He kept his voice almost friendly. That was the worst part, the almost friendly. "You want to know what happens in a real fight when you tap nothing? Nobody stops. Real life doesn't tap. So maybe instead of complaining about the rules, you should get stronger so you don't need to tap." A few students along the wall nodded slightly. Automatic agreement. Practice deference. Ethan was already moving across the mat. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He moved the way he had learned to move a long time ago, and in a very different place deliberately, with the kind of quietness that wasn't peace, but was the thing that came just before it ended. He crouched next to Noah, put one hand on his son's shoulder. With the other hand, he pressed lightly along Noah's knee, his fingers reading the damage, the way a man who has seen a lot of injuries learns to read them, not medically, not with certainty, but with enough experience to know whether something was wrong. Something was wrong. "Can you put weight on it?" Ethan asked quietly. Just to Noah. Just the 2 of them, like the room had disappeared. "I don't know." Noah's jaw was tight. "Dad, I'm fine." "You don't have to be fine. Can you put weight on it?" Noah tried. He winced. He shook his head. Ethan nodded once. He stood up, keeping his hand on his son's shoulder. He looked at Brandon Voss for the first time since walking across the mat. Brandon was watching him with the expression of a man waiting to be thanked for his time. "We're going to need a moment," Ethan said. Quiet, flat, no heat in it whatsoever. "I'd like to get my son off the mat." "He's fine," Brandon said. "This is training. This is what training looks like. I know it's uncomfortable to watch, but he can't put weight on his knee. He's being dramatic. He cannot put weight on his knee." Ethan said it the same way he'd said it the first time. Same volume, same tone, same complete absence of emotional escalation. That was the thing about Ethan Cole. The thing that people who had never met a truly dangerous man sometimes mistook for weakness. He didn't get louder when he was serious. He got quieter. Brandon heard it somewhere underneath the performance he was putting on for his students. He heard it, and something primitive in him shifted just slightly, like a dog that picks up a scent and doesn't know what it means, but knows it means something. "Fine," Brandon said, spreading his hands in mock generosity. "Help your son off the mat. Then maybe we can have a conversation about whether this program is the right fit for him." Ethan helped Noah to the bench along the wall. He took off his son's shoe, pressed 2 fingers gently above the kneecap, watched Noah's face. The swelling was already starting. Not broken, he was fairly sure, but damaged. Ligament, maybe. Definitely not nothing. "We're going to get that looked at," Ethan said. "Dad." Noah's voice was low, tight with frustration. "Don't make a thing out of this." "I'm not making anything. I'm taking you to get your knee looked at. I mean, don't—" Noah stopped, looked at the floor. "Don't make it worse." Ethan looked at him. "Is this the first time?" Noah didn't answer. "Noah." "He's hard on everyone," Noah said. But the way he said it was the way a person says something they've been rehearsing. Rehearsing because they know someone's going to ask. "He's just intense. Some of the guys can handle it." "Can you handle it?" A long pause. Noah picked at a loose thread on his sleeve. "I was handling it," he said finally. "Until tonight." Ethan sat with that for a moment. He looked across the dojo, where Brandon was already back to demonstrating a technique performing for the room. The incident with Noah already shelved and forgotten, or at least pretended to be. 2 teenage boys were watching with careful, practiced blankness. They'd learned that looking too curious got you pulled into things. "All right," Ethan said. He helped Noah up carefully, keeping his son's weight off the left leg. He got his jacket from the chair. He picked up Noah's bag. They were nearly at the door when Brandon called out, "Hey." Not aggressive, just loud enough to land. For what it's worth, and I say this as someone who cares about his students, if the boy's going to get better, he's going to need a father who lets him fall down sometimes. Protecting him from every hard thing isn't going to help him. Several students glanced away. 2 of the parents along the wall looked up. Ethan stopped at the door. He didn't turn around right away. He stood there for a breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, and anyone watching closely would have seen something pass through him. Not anger, not exactly, but something that moved through his body like a current and then settled. He turned around. "My son was injured," Ethan said. His voice was exactly the same as it had been. Same temperature, same pace. "By a technique applied past the point of consent. That's not training. I understand the difference." He paused. "So do you." Brandon smiled, the smile of a man who had never lost an argument in his own building. "And what's that supposed to mean?" "It means what it means." Ethan opened the door. "Good night." The drive to the emergency clinic took 14 minutes. Noah sat in the passenger seat with his knee elevated against the dashboard, staring out the window at the dark Texas road. Ethan drove the way he did most things, without wasted movement, without unnecessary commentary. After a while, Noah said, "How bad do you think it is?" "Probably a sprain. Could be a partial ligament tear. We'll know in about an hour." "If it's a tear, does that mean surgery?" "Let's wait and see." "Dad." Noah turned and looked at him. He was 16, which meant he still had the face of a boy, but was practicing the expressions of a man. "What are you going to do?" "Right now I'm going to get your knee looked at." After that, Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else's kid," he said. "That's not—" Noah rubbed his face with both hands. "You're not going to go back there." "I'm not planning anything. I just want to talk to him." "Dad, that guy. He's not the kind of guy who responds to talking. He's got followers in there, students who basically worship him, parents who think he's some kind of genius. You're just going to make it worse. You're going to go in there, and he's going to make you look—" Noah stopped. "He's going to do what he did to me. He's going to make you feel small." Ethan glanced at his son. "Does he make you feel small?" A silence. "Yeah," Noah admitted. "He does. That's why I didn't tell you." "Why?" "Because I didn't want you to see it." Noah pressed his lips together. "I've been going there 4 months. I'm still one of the worst ones in the class." He points it out, in front of everyone. He compares me to the other guys, says, "I don't work hard enough," says I've got a weak mindset. A pause. Some of the guys laugh. Not all of them, but some. Ethan said nothing for a moment. "And you kept going back," he said finally. "Because I didn't want to quit. Because I don't know. I thought if I could just get better, he'd stop. If I could just show him I wasn't what he said I was." Noah shook his head slowly. "Stupid." "It's not stupid," Ethan said. "It's the right instinct applied to the wrong situation." "What does that mean?" "It means the part of you that doesn't want to quit that's good. That's worth keeping. But you can't earn respect from a man who's decided to withhold it from you. That's not a training problem. That's a character problem. His, not yours." Noah was quiet. Then, "You sound like you know something about that." Ethan's jaw shifted. He looked back at the road. "A little," he said. The clinic confirmed a moderate ligament sprain. No surgery, but 2 to 4 weeks off training ice and compression, a follow-up with an orthopedic specialist to rule out anything structural. The nurse was kind and efficient. Noah sat through it without complaining, which made Ethan's chest hurt in a way he couldn't quite name. On the drive home, Noah fell asleep in the passenger seat. Ethan drove in silence. I thought about what his son had said. "He makes me feel small," and he turned that sentence over and over, the way you turn a stone in your hand, feeling its weight, its edges. He thought about a lot of things on that drive. I thought about a training facility in Virginia years ago, where a commander had told him that the most dangerous thing in any high-pressure environment wasn't violence, it was bad leadership. That men would endure almost any amount of hardship if they believed in the person asking them to endure it. And they would break eventually under far less pressure if they didn't. I thought about Noah 4 months. 4 months going back to that place every Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday morning, carrying something heavy that he'd never told his father about. Because he didn't want his father to see him as weak. And then, Ethan thought about Brandon Voss, his trophies on the wall, his followers, nodding, his careful voice wrapped around cruelty, like a gift wrapper, around something rotten, and he felt something settle in him. Not anger. Anger was bright and hot and quick. This was something older. Something colder, something that knew how to be patient. He pulled into the driveway. He sat for a moment with the engine off. Noah was still asleep. Ethan looked at his son's face, jaw slack teenager, soft in sleep. The practiced toughness all, and something moved through him that he didn't have a word for. Something that was part love and part grief and part a very old, very quiet fury that had been waiting a long time for a reason to matter. He made a decision. Not about what to do. Not yet. About what kind of man he was going to be while he did it. He got out of the truck. He walked around to the passenger side. He opened the door, gently put one hand on his son's shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "we're home." The next morning, Ethan went to work. He was a diesel mechanic at Hartley & Sons Automotive, which served primarily the trucking companies and farming operations that kept the county alive. The shop smelled like engine grease and burned metal and the cheap coffee that Russ Hartley had made the same way for 30 years. Ethan had worked there for 7 years. He was their best mechanic, not because he had the most formal training, but because he had the same relationship with machines that he'd had with everything else in his life. Patient, methodical, allergic to shortcuts. He arrived at 6 in the morning. He put on his coveralls. He crawled under a Peterbilt with a transmission that had developed a fault nobody else had been able to diagnose. He worked. This was what Ethan did with difficult things. He worked. Around 8:30, Russ Hartley appeared beside the truck with a coffee cup. Russ was 62 and had the hands of a man who'd been working on engines since before they had computers in them, and the face of a man who'd seen enough of life to stop being surprised by it. "Heard about Noah," Russ said. Ethan slid out from under the truck. He accepted the coffee. "Word travels. Small town." Russ leaned against the workbench. "How bad be a sprain? He'll be okay." "And the instructor?" Ethan looked at his coffee. "That's a longer conversation," he said. "You going to do something stupid?" Russ asked. Not worried exactly, more like the question was professional, the way a doctor asks if you've been drinking before prescribing something. "I'm going to go talk to him." Russ studied him. "That all? That's where I'm starting." Russ made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "You know, I've known you 7 years, and I still don't know what you did before you came here." "Mechanics," Ethan said. "Different kind," Russ said. He pushed off the workbench. "Don't do anything that puts you in a courtroom." "I'll try." I went back to the dojo at 9 that night. Not because that was the best time, because Noah was asleep and the shop was closed, and Ethan had spent 11 hours under and around trucks, and the physical work had burned off everything that wasn't essential, and what was left was simply the thing he had decided to do. He knocked on the door. He waited. A student opened at 17, maybe 18, with the kind of careful face that young men develop when they're trying to look older than they are. He looked at Ethan with the wariness of someone who had been trained to be wary of unexpected visitors. "Mr. Voss," Ethan said. "Is he here?" Yeah, hold on." He waited in the entrance. The dojo was smaller at night, the overhead lights casting hard shadows. The trophies were all along one wall, a long row of gold and silver and bronze plaques and photographs, a display that had clearly been arranged with care. Ethan counted 18 trophies without trying. Brandon came out from the back wearing a hoodie and track pants, a protein shake in his hand. He looked at Ethan with the expression of a man who had already prepared for this conversation. "I was wondering if you'd come back," Brandon said. He was careful to sound relaxed. "Come to complain." "I came to ask for an apology," Ethan said. Brandon raised his eyebrows. "An apology?" "A real one, to my son, in front of his classmates if possible. Acknowledging that what happened last night wasn't training, it was something else. And a commitment to stop." Brandon held up one hand. He walked to the counter that served as the front desk, set down his protein shake. "I've been doing this for 12 years. I've trained 4 national champions. I have a waiting list of 60 families right now who would give anything to get their kid into my program." He looked at Ethan. "And you come in here and tell me I owe your son an apology." "I do," Ethan said. "Your son tapped because he's soft." Brandon's voice sharpened slightly. "He's been soft since day one. I've got 12-year-olds in this program who take harder hits without crying. I've pushed him because that's the only way he's ever going to grow. And if you coddle him every time he faces something uncomfortable, he's going to be 35 years old and still flinching every time life pushes back." "You heard him," Ethan said. "Pass the tap. That's not discomfort. That's something else. He's fine. He has a sprain. He has a sprain." Brandon repeated the word with contempt. "You know how many sprains I've played through. You know how many injuries my champions have trained through. Your kid got a sprain because he doesn't have the body conditioning to." "You went past the tap," Ethan said again. Still quiet. Still that same quiet. Brandon walked around the counter. He walked closer the way that men who are used to being the most physically imposing person in the room walk closer when they want to make a point. "Let me tell you something," Brandon said. His voice was low now, the performance stripped back to something more direct. "Men like you come in here all the time. Worried dads, Sensitive dads. Dads who can't watch their son get pushed without running onto the mat like it's a soccer game. And they always want to talk about feelings, about apologies, about what their kid deserves. He paused. And their kids grow up weak, because their fathers were weak. Ethan looked at him. "You think I'm weak," Ethan said. It wasn't a question. "I think you're a mechanic who's never been in a real fight in his life, and I think you're about to tell me how to run my dojo." A beat of silence. "I want the apology," Ethan said. "That's what I came for. I'm asking one more time." Brandon spread his hands, turned to his student who was still hovering near the door, and gave a short, incredulous laugh. He turned back to Ethan. "Get out of my dojo," he said, "and don't come back." Ethan looked at him for a long moment. He looked at the student near the door, 17-18, watching with wide eyes. He looked at Brandon, the hoodie, the protein shake on the counter, the 18 trophies along the wall, the easy certainty of a man who had never in his life faced a consequence he wasn't in control of. He looked at the door. He walked toward it. And then, with a motion so deliberate it almost seemed ceremonial, he reached up and turned the deadbolt. The click of the lock was very small in the empty dojo. Brandon stared at him. "Hey." The casual tone was gone now. "What are you doing?" Ethan turned around. He reached up and pulled his jacket off, draping it over the back of a chair beside the door. He was wearing a plain gray t-shirt. On his left forearm, partially visible below the sleeve, was a tattoo, a trident, small and dark and old. Brandon's student made a small involuntary sound. Brandon looked at this tattoo. He looked at Ethan's face. Something changed in him. Not fear, yet, not full fear, but the first tremor of it. The first small shift in the ground beneath a building before the real shaking starts. "You can't. 3 hours ago," Ethan said. "My son told me that you make him feel small." He walked to the edge of the mat. He removed his shoes. He stepped onto the mat and stood there straight and quiet, his arms loose at his sides. "He said he didn't tell me because he didn't want me to see him that way." He looked at Brandon. "My son," Ethan said, "has never once had reason to be ashamed of himself in front of me. Not one day in 16 years. He's the best thing I've ever done." His voice was very low, very steady. "And you took 4 months of his confidence. 4 months of him thinking he was less than he was. And last night you took whatever was left and put it on the floor in front of his classmates." Brandon said nothing. "I want the apology," Ethan said. "This is the last time I'm going to ask." Brandon stared at him across the mat. And then, because he was a man who had never learned that the loudest voice in a room is not always the most dangerous one, because he had 12 years of winning and 18 trophies and a student watching and an ego that had never once been forced to reckon with itself, he stepped onto the mat. He dropped into his fighting stance. "You want to do this," he said. "Okay, let's do this." Ethan looked at him. The tired mechanic was still there, somewhere. The grease under the fingernails, the ache in his lower back from a day under a Peterbilt, the quiet house where his son was sleeping with an ice pack on his knee. But underneath all that, older than any of it, patient, in the way that only things which have had to wait a very long time learn to be patient. The Navy SEAL was still there too. "All right," Ethan said, and the dojo was very still. Brandon attacked first. He came in fast, the way a man attacks when he needs to prove something quickly, before doubt has time to settle in. A sharp jab to test the distance, then a cross aimed at Ethan's jaw, then a low kick to the thigh that landed with a sound like a bat hitting a sandbag. Ethan moved. Not dramatically. Not the way fights look in movies where the hero rolls and spins and makes it look choreographed. He moved the way water moves around a rock, without wasted effort, without panic, with the simple efficiency of something that has been shaped over a very long time by a very specific kind of pressure. The jab missed by 2 inches. The cross he slipped to the left. The kick he accepted on his thigh because he chose to, because letting it land told him something about how Brandon generated power, where his weight was, how long he needed to reset. Brandon reset. He looked at Ethan with new eyes. Not fear yet, but the first crack in the certainty. "All right," Brandon said, And this time his voice had lost something. Just a fraction. Just enough that the student watching from the door heard it, even if he couldn't name what was missing. "You've done something before." Ethan said nothing. Brandon came again, this time slower, smarter. He was good. Ethan would give him that. 12 years of training and genuine tournament experience showed in the economy of his movement, the way he didn't telegraph, the way he kept his chin down and his hands up and his eyes on Ethan's center mass. He was the kind of fighter who won competitions. He was the kind of fighter who looked devastating against people who fought the way he did. He had never in his life fought someone who didn't fight the way he did. Brandon threw a combination jab-jab body kick, spinning back elbow, and it was beautiful technically. The kind of combination that won rounds. Ethan ate the first jab to read the timing slipped. The second caught the kick on his forearm, and then did something Brandon wasn't ready for. He stepped inside the spinning elbow. He closed the distance to 0. And at 0 distance with his left forearm against Brandon's chest and his right hand controlling Brandon's spinning arm. He felt the younger man freeze, the way prey animals freeze when they realize the thing they thought they were chasing has turned around. "I don't want to hurt you," Ethan said quietly. His mouth was close to Brandon's ear. His voice was completely calm. "I want the apology, that's all." Brandon exploded backwards, ripping himself free, putting 5 feet between them. His chest was heaving. His student at the door had stopped breathing. "Who are you?" Brandon said. "Nobody important," Ethan said. Brandon stared at him for 3 full seconds. Then he did the thing that men like him always do when confusion turns to anger. He committed. He came forward with everything, no longer boxing, no longer the controlled tournament fighter. He grabbed for the clinch, tried to throw his weight into a takedown, got his arms around Ethan's waist and drove forward with his legs. Ethan let him get the takedown. He let Brandon put him on his back, because he wanted Brandon on top of him. Because that was where he was most dangerous. Brandon got to his knees, got both hands up, cocked his right arm, back to end it, and Ethan caught his wrist, threaded his legs up, locked his ankles behind Brandon's neck, and applied a triangle choke with the kind of smooth, terrible efficiency that only comes from practicing a technique 10,000 times until it becomes a reflex instead of a thought. Brandon's free hand slapped the mat. Once. Twice. Ethan released him. He stood up. He stepped back. He waited. Brandon stayed on the mat for a long moment with his hands braced on the floor, his head down, his breathing ragged. The student at the door had taken 2 steps forward without realizing it. His hands slightly raised his face, the face of someone watching something they don't have the emotional vocabulary for yet. Then Brandon laughed. It wasn't a funny laugh. It was the sound a man makes when something inside him breaks, and laughter is the only noise that comes out. "Where?" Brandon said, still breathing hard, still on the mat. "Did you learn that?" Ethan picked up his jacket from the chair by the door. "A long time ago," he said. "In a place you don't want to know about." He unlocked the door. He pulled it open. "The apology," he said without turning around. "Tomorrow, in front of his classmates. That's what I'm asking for. Last time." He walked out into the night. Brandon sat on the mat for a long time after he was gone. The student, his name was Marcus. 17 years old, had been training with Brandon for 2 years. Idolized him. Had a poster of him on his bedroom wall, walked slowly over and stood there not knowing what to say. Brandon looked up at him. "Not a word," Brandon said. His voice was different. Something had gone out of it like air from a tire. "Not to anyone." Marcus nodded, but he was already thinking, already turning it over, already understanding somewhere in the part of his brain that was still young enough to be honest, that what he had just watched was not 2 men fighting. It was something else. It was a man who fought with everything he had being stopped by someone who chose how far to go. I went home that night and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He didn't know why he couldn't sleep. He didn't have the words for it yet. But what was keeping him awake was the moment Ethan had released the choke. The moment he could have ended it and chose to stop. Marcus had trained his whole teenage life with a man who never stopped when he could keep going. He had thought that was what strength looked like. Now he wasn't sure. Ethan drove home. He sat in his truck in the driveway for a few minutes with the engine off. His knuckles ached slightly from where a punch had grazed them. His thigh was going to bruise where the kick had landed. His lower back, the one that had bothered him since a jump in training years ago, was talking to him in the way it always did when he asked too much of it. He sat with all of it. He felt something that wasn't pride and wasn't satisfaction. It was more complicated than either of those. It was the feeling of a man who has done something he needed to do and already isn't sure he did it right. He went inside. He checked on Noah. His son was asleep, the ice pack long since melted on the nightstand, one arm thrown over his face the way he'd slept since he was 4 years old. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to bed. He lay awake for a long time. The question that kept him awake was not whether Brandon would apologize. He thought he probably would. Men who meet their consequences sometimes do when the consequences are clear enough and immediate enough to cut through the story they've been telling themselves. The question that kept Ethan awake was what he had felt on that mat. Because the truth he had been carrying for 10 years, the reason he had buried that part of himself after leaving the military, the reason he had rebuilt himself from the ground up as a mechanic and a father in a small town where nobody asked hard questions, was that it had not been difficult tonight. It had not been something he had to dig for. It had been right there under the surface, intact, patient, exactly where he'd left it. That was what scared him. Not Brandon Voss, not the fight, not the dojo or the trophies or any of it. The fact that after 10 years of choosing a different life, the old one was still in him, like it had never left. Like it was just waiting. Like it would always be waiting. He stared at the ceiling. He thought about the trident tattoo on his forearm. He thought about a night in a city he couldn't name, in a country he sometimes still dreamed about, when a decision he'd made in 3 seconds had changed the number of people who came home. He thought about the debriefs and the silences and the thing his team leader had told him afterward, not about the decision about his face when it was over. "You didn't look relieved," the team leader had said. "Most guys look relieved." "What did I look like?" Ethan had asked. The team leader had been quiet for a moment. Then, "Like you filed something, like you put it away." Ethan had not known what to say to that. He still didn't. He finally fell asleep around 2 in the morning and dreamed about nothing. The next day he made breakfast. Eggs and toast, and the coffee that Noah said tasted like motor oil, but drank anyway, because it was the coffee his father made, and rituals mean things even when the coffee is bad. Noah came to the kitchen on crutches. The clinic had given him a pair just in case, and sat down at the table and looked at his father with the expression of a person who has been awake thinking and wants to ask something, but hasn't decided if they should. Ethan set the plate down in front of him. "How's the knee?" "Stiff," Noah said. "Better than last night." He picked up his fork. Put it down. "Dad." "Yeah." "Did you go back there last night?" Ethan poured coffee into both mugs. "Yes," he said. Noah was quiet for a moment. "What happened?" Ethan sat down. He wrapped both hands around his mug. "I asked him for an apology," he said. And we'll see." Noah stared at him. "That's it? You just asked him?" "That's what I went for." "Dad." Noah leaned forward slightly. "Your knuckles are bruised." Ethan looked down at his hands. He hadn't noticed that he hadn't hidden them. He curled his fingers around the mug. "He had a choice," Ethan said carefully. "I gave him a clear choice. I asked him twice. And the third time..." A silence. "The third time I made the situation easier for him to understand," Ethan said. Noah stared at him. Then something passed across his face, something complicated, something that was not quite the anger Ethan expected, and not quite relief either. "Are you okay?" Noah asked. The question caught Ethan off guard. He looked at his son's 16 crutches against the table beside him, asking his father if he was okay. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I'm okay." "You're not..." "I'm fine, Noah." Noah picked up his fork again. He ate a few bites. The kitchen was quiet, except for the coffee maker finishing its cycle. Then he said without looking up, "When I was at that dojo, The other students, there's this kid Marcus. He's been there 2 years. He's good, like actually good, and he follows Brandon around like Brandon made him. But one time after practice, he stayed behind, and he came over to me while I was getting my bag, and he said, Noah stopped. He said, "Don't let him get inside your head." He said it fast, like he was afraid someone would hear him. Ethan listened. "I think Marcus is scared too," Noah said. "I think there are a lot of them who are scared. They've been there long enough that they've started calling it something else." "What do they call it?" Ethan asked. "Toughness," Noah said. He looked up. "They call being afraid of your instructor toughness, because he's convinced them that fear and respect are the same thing." Ethan looked at his son. "When did you figure that out?" he asked. "Last night," Noah said quietly. "When I was lying in bed. I kept thinking, why did I keep going back? And I realized it was because I was trying to make him not afraid of me anymore. Of being afraid of him, I mean. I was trying to train my way out of the fear." He paused. "That's not training. That's something else." "Yeah," Ethan said. "It is." "What is it?" Ethan thought about it. "It's what happens to people," he said finally, "when someone with authority over them decides that control is more valuable than growth. They start working for the wrong goal. They stop trying to get better and start trying to make the pain stop. And they call it the same thing." Noah was quiet. "You sound like you know a lot about this," he said. "I do," Ethan said. "From the military." Ethan wrapped his hands around his mug again. "From a long time ago," he said. Yeah, Noah had never pushed hard on the military years. He knew the shape of it that his father had served, that it had been serious, that there were things Ethan didn't talk about. He had the sense, the way children do, even when they're teenagers, that those silences were not about exclusion, but about protection. His father was not hiding from him. His father was making sure certain things didn't follow them into the kitchen at breakfast. He respected that. He had always respected that. But this morning was different. "Were you scared?" Noah asked. "When you were wherever you were, doing whatever you did?" Ethan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Every time," he said. "But you still." "Fear isn't the opposite of courage," Ethan said. "Fear is the price of it. You don't pay courage instead of fear. You pay courage with fear. You spend it. That's the transaction." Noah looked at him for a long moment. "That's the first time you've said anything like that to me," he said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Why now?" Ethan looked at his son. "Because last night," he said quietly, "you said you didn't tell me because you didn't want me to see you as weak. And I need you to understand something. I need you to understand it clearly, not as a nice thing I'm saying to make you feel better, but as a fact." He paused. "You went back to that place 4 months, every Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. You went back knowing you were going to get humiliated, knowing he was going to single you out. You kept going back because you refused to let fear be the reason you quit." He held his son's eyes. "I have trained with some of the hardest men who have ever lived, and that refusal is exactly what it looks like. You were doing it for the wrong man, but you were doing it." Noah's jaw worked. He looked down at his plate. "Don't," he said, and his voice was tight. "Don't what?" "Don't make me cry before 9 in the morning." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for a very long time. He picked up his coffee mug. He looked out the window at the Texas morning pale light, a mockingbird on the fence post, the neighbor's truck idling in the driveway 2 houses down. "Eat your eggs," he said. Noah ate his eggs. They sat in the kitchen together, the two of them, and the morning did what Texas mornings do, and got slowly brighter, and neither of them said anything else for a while, and it was the best conversation Ethan Cole had had in years. That afternoon his phone rang. He was in the garage doing nothing in particular, tinkering with the truck's fuel line, which didn't actually need work, but which gave his hands something to do. He looked at the number. Didn't recognize it. He answered anyway. "Mr. Cole." The voice was young male, slightly nervous. "This is Marcus Webb. I train at Black Eagle. I was there last night." Ethan set down the wrench. "I remember," he said. A pause. I wanted you to know. He came in this morning, Mr. Voss. He came in early before any of us got there and he had a list. He was making calls. I overheard him when I came in through the side door. Another pause longer. He's calling the parents. He's telling them a story about last night. A version that it's not what happened. Ethan leaned against the truck. What's he telling them? He said. That you broke in, that you attacked him, that your son has been a problem student and you came in and he's saying you were aggressive, threatening that he's thinking about filing a police report. Marcus's voice dropped. Mr. Cole, that's not what happened. I was there. I saw the whole thing. Ethan processed this without saying anything. Mr. Cole. I heard you, Marcus, Ethan said. Thank you for calling. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, Ethan said, which was true. Marcus, can I ask you something? Yeah. Why are you calling me? You've been with him 2 years. That's a risk. A long silence on the other end. Because, Marcus said, finally, his voice careful and slow, like he was figuring it out while he said it. Because when you let him go last night, when you had him and you let him go, I've never seen him look like that before. Ever. And I just kept thinking. I kept thinking if you were the kind of person he was saying you were, you wouldn't have let him go. Ethan said nothing. He would have, Marcus said quietly. He wouldn't have stopped. Ethan stood in his garage for a moment after the call ended, holding his phone, looking at the oil stain on the concrete floor that had been there since before he moved in, and that he'd never bothered to clean because it felt like it belonged there. Brandon was going to try to control the story. Of course he was. It was the only play he had. When the truth is a problem, you move faster than the truth. You build a different story, louder and simpler, and you spread it wide enough that people are tired of hearing about it by the time anyone starts asking questions. Ethan had seen it before. Not in dojos. In places where the stakes were higher and the stories were bigger. The mechanics were the same. He thought about what his options were. He could do nothing. Let Brandon tell his version. Let it circulate through the small-town ecosystem of whispers and second-hand accounts and parent group chats. Let it settle into the local mythology as another story about an angry dad who overreacted. That had costs. Costs to Noah, costs to the other students, costs to the next kid who got hurt by Brandon, and whose father heard the story and decided not to say anything. He could go to the police first, get ahead of it. But what did he actually have? A sprained knee and a story, and Brandon's student as a witness, which Brandon would immediately work to discredit. Or he could do the thing he was actually considering. He could talk to the parents. Not all of them. The ones Marcus said had been called. He had their names, or he could get them through Noah, through the clinic's records, if they'd treated anyone else from the dojo through Russ, who knew everyone in town, going back 30 years. He could tell the truth. Simply. Without theater. The way he had learned to deliver hard information in environments where how you delivered it determined whether people acted on it. He called Russ. I need to ask you something, Ethan said when Russ picked up on the second ring. Ask. Brandon Voss's dojo. The families in town who send their kids there. How many of them do you know personally? A pause. The sound of Russ thinking. 6, 7 families. Maybe 8. Why? Because he's about to tell them a story about me, Ethan said. And I need them to hear the real one first. Another pause. Longer this time. You need me to make some calls, Russ said. I need you to decide if you think it's the right thing to do, Ethan said. This isn't Russ. I'm not asking you to do something for me because of 7 years. I'm asking you because you know these families, and I think there are kids in that building getting hurt in ways their parents don't know about. So you make the call. The line was quiet for long enough that Ethan thought Russ might have set the phone down. Then, I'll call Danny Reeves and Ellen Park. Their kids are both in the junior program. Danny's son came home 2 months ago with bruised ribs that Danny thought were from sparring. I always wondered. That's enough, Ethan said. Thank you. Ethan. Russ's voice was careful. How far are you planning to take this? As far as it needs to go, Ethan said. What does that mean? Ethan thought about it. It means I'm not going to start anything, he said. But I'm done letting him end things before they're finished. That evening, Ethan's doorbell rang. He opened the door to find a woman he didn't recognize. Mid-40s, short dark hair, wearing a jacket from a local hospital. She had the look of someone who had driven somewhere in a hurry and was still catching up to the fact of having arrived. "Mr. Cole," she said. "I'm Dr. Patricia Reeves, Danny's wife. My son is in the junior program at Black Eagle." "Come in," Ethan said. She came in and stood in his living room and didn't sit down when he offered. "My husband called me an hour ago," she said. "He said your friend Russ called him and said there was something I needed to know about the dojo. I've been skeptical. I want to be honest with you. I have been very skeptical of the idea that there's something wrong there because Tyler, my son, has been happier in the last 6 months than I've seen him in years, and Brandon Voss has been the reason." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "But Tyler came home 3 months ago with bruised ribs, and when I asked him about it, he said it was from sparring, and I believed him." Ethan nodded. "And tonight," Patricia said, "when Danny told me what happened to your son, what actually happened, the knee, the tap, the whole thing. Tyler was in the room. He didn't know we were talking about it. He was doing his homework at the kitchen table." Her voice tightened. "He stopped doing his homework. He got very still. And then he said, without looking up, he said, 'That happened to me too.'" Ethan stood very still. "He said it happened twice," Patricia said. "He said Brandon went past the tap twice and told him afterward that real fighters learn to fight through the tap. And he didn't tell us because Brandon told the class." She stopped again, this time for longer. Her jaw was working. "He told the class that boys who ran home to their parents after training weren't ready to be warriors. He said warriors handled things themselves." The room was quiet. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "I want to know what you're doing," Patricia said. Her voice was very controlled. The voice of a doctor who has learned how to contain large things in small spaces. "What your plan is. Because my husband wants to pull Tyler immediately, and I think that might be right, but I also think if we just pull him and move on, nothing changes for the next kid." "Sit down," Ethan said. "Please." She sat. Ethan sat across from her. "Here's what I know," he said. "I know he's calling parents right now with a version of last night that makes me the problem. I know there's at least one student who was there and is willing to say what actually happened. And I know that what happened to Noah probably wasn't the first time it happened to anyone." He paused. "The question is, who else knows what their kids haven't told them?" Patricia looked at him. "How do you get them to talk?" she said. "The kids." Tyler barely said 2 words. "If Danny hadn't been in the room, and if he hadn't heard, Tyler wasn't going to tell us." "Because Brandon taught him that telling was weakness," Ethan said. "Yes." The word came out of her with weight. "Kids stop talking," Ethan said, "when the person who taught them to talk has been replaced by the person telling them not to. The way you get them back is you take the second person out of the equation. Not physically. You take away the authority. You show them, not just tell them that the person they were afraid of is not untouchable, that what was done to them was wrong, clearly publicly without any ambiguity." He paused. "That's why the apology matters. Not for me, not for Noah, for Tyler, for Marcus, for whoever else is in that building right now wondering if what happened to them was their fault." Patricia looked at him for a long moment. "You're not just a mechanic," she said. "I'm absolutely just a mechanic," Ethan said. "Right now, I'm a mechanic with a plan." The corner of her mouth moved. "What's the plan?" she asked. Ethan leaned forward. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "I'm going to the dojo. I'm going to go when the junior class is there because Tyler is in the junior class, and so is the daughter of the other family Russ called. I'm going to walk in before he has a chance to set a narrative. And I'm going to ask in front of everyone for what I asked for before. A public apology to Noah. And I'm going to stand there until I get it, or until every parent in that room understands exactly why he won't give it." Patricia was quiet. "What if he calls the police?" she said. "Then I'll talk to the police," Ethan said. "Marcus was there. The truth is simple. Simple truth survives police reports." "And if he refuses the apology?" Ethan looked at her. "Then we'll deal with what that means," he said. "For his license. For the parents who might want to ask questions about what's been happening to their kids. For the state athletic commission that certifies him. He paused. He can refuse. He can also live with the consequences of refusing. Patricia Reeves sat in Ethan Cole's living room for another 20 minutes. She asked careful questions, and he answered them with the same calm flatness he brought to most things. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "My son looked up to that man," she said. "For 6 months. He talked about him every night at dinner." "I know," Ethan said. It's going to hurt him, when this comes apart." "Yes," Ethan said. "It will." "Is there a way to—" "No," Ethan said gently. "There's no way to make this not hurt. The only thing we can do is make sure what comes after it is true. So when he builds trust again, he builds it in something real." Patricia nodded. She put her hand on the doorframe. 9 o'clock, she said. "That's when the junior class starts." 9 o'clock, Ethan confirmed. She left. He stood at the door and watched her car back out of the driveway. Behind him from the hallway, Noah's voice came quietly. "I wasn't asleep." Ethan turned. Noah was standing at the end of the hallway on his crutches, hair messed from the pillow, looking at his father with an expression Ethan had no category for. "How much did you hear?" Ethan asked. "Enough." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Tyler Reeves. He's in my class. Noah stopped. "He told me once that Brandon was the first person who ever told him he had real potential. He said it like it was the most important thing anyone had ever said to him." "Yeah," Ethan said. "He worships him, Dad." "I know. This is going to—" "I know," Ethan said again, softly. "It's going to hurt. And then something honest is going to be in the place where something false was. And honest things, even when they're painful, give you something to stand on." Noah looked at him. "You really believe that?" he said. Ethan thought about it. He thought about the road back from places he had been. The years of building something quiet and real in a small town, of choosing breakfast and fuel lines and a son's soccer games over the life he'd had before. The long, patient work of becoming the person he had decided to be. "Yeah," he said. "I really do." Noah looked at the floor. Then he looked up. "I want to be there," he said. "Tomorrow." "Noah, not to fight, I'm not going to do anything. I just want to be there." His voice was very clear. "He humiliated me in front of my class, Dad. If he's going to apologize, I want to be there to hear it. I want everyone to see that it didn't break me." Ethan looked at his son. His son who had spent 4 months being told he was less than he was. His son, who was standing in a dark hallway at 10 o'clock at night, on crutches with a sprained knee and a bruised confidence, and a jaw set in a line that Ethan recognized because he saw it every morning in the bathroom mirror. "Okay," Ethan said. Yeah. He walked toward him. He put one hand briefly on the back of Noah's neck the way he had since Noah was small. "Go to bed. 9 o'clock comes early." Noah turned to go. Then he stopped. "Dad," he said. "Yeah. The trident tattoo." Noah didn't look back. "I always thought it was just a symbol. Something from when you served." Ethan said nothing. "It's more than that," Noah said. Not a question. A long pause. "Go to bed, Noah," Ethan said. Noah went to bed, and Ethan stood in the dark hallway of his house and looked at the back of his forearm and the small dark shape of the trident, and thought about how many versions of himself had existed inside the same body and which ones were still there, and whether that was a burden or a weapon or both, and whether the difference between the two was simply a matter of which direction you pointed it. He turned off the lights. He stood at the window for a minute, looking out at the quiet street. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock he was going to walk back into that building. Not as the old self. Not as the seal. Not as the man who had locked the door and stepped onto the mat the night before. He was going to walk in as Noah's father. That was enough. That had always been enough. He just needed to remind himself of that one more time before morning came. 8:47 in the morning. Ethan pulled into the parking lot of Black Eagle Martial Arts Academy 13 minutes before the junior class was scheduled to start. He sat in the truck for a moment. Noah was in the passenger seat, crutches propped between his knees, looking straight ahead, through the windshield, with the kind of stillness that wasn't calm, but was the thing a person builds over calm when calm isn't enough. Patricia Reeves was already there. Her car was parked 2 spots down, and through the window, Ethan could see her on her phone. Her posture, the posture of someone managing several things at once and doing it well. Beside her in the passenger seat was a boy. Ethan recognized from Noah's descriptions. Tyler, 12 years old, dark-haired with the particular look of a kid who had been told he was coming somewhere and wasn't sure yet what that meant. Danny Reeves's truck pulled in 30 seconds later. He was a big man, wide through the shoulders, with a contractor's hands, and the face of someone who spent most of his time outdoors and the rest of his time trying not to say the wrong thing. He parked. He looked at Ethan's truck. He nodded once, the way men who don't know each other well, but are about to do something together, nod at each other before it starts. "You ready?" Ethan asked Noah. Noah looked at the front door of the dojo. "No," he said. "Let's go anyway." They got out of the truck. Ellen Park arrived at the same time, a small woman in a running jacket, her daughter Jessica at her side, 8 years old, and confused about why her mother's hand was holding hers more tightly than usual. 2 other cars Ethan didn't recognize pulled in behind them. Russ had made more calls than he'd mentioned. Ethan counted 6 parents and 4 children standing in the parking lot of a martial arts dojo on a Tuesday morning. None of them fully certain what came next. All of them there because something had happened to their kids that they were still in the process of understanding the shape of. He looked at all of them. "Thank you for coming," he said. He kept it simple. "I'm not going to say much out here. I'm going to go inside and ask for something that should have been given 2 days ago. You're welcome to come in. You're not obligated." He paused. "But if you've been wondering what's been happening in there, this is the morning you find out." He walked toward the door. Behind him he heard footsteps. All of them followed. The junior class was already warming up when they walked in. 8 kids, 7 to 12 years old, running laps around the mat under the supervision of a teenage assistant instructor named Cole, not Ethan's Noah. Another Cole, 17, and Ernest, who had the good instincts to immediately stop what he was doing and go still when the door opened and 6 adults walked in. Brandon was in the back behind the partition that served as his office. Ethan could hear him. A phone call, the easy authoritative voice carrying through the thin wall. He heard his own name. He heard the word attorney. Ethan walked to the edge of the mat and stood there. The kids had stopped running. They were looking at the adults, then at Noah on his crutches, then back at the adults. Children are better than anyone at reading the temperature of a room. Every one of them understood within 10 seconds that something was different about today. Tyler Reeves found Noah immediately. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not words. Nothing that complicated. Just recognition. The recognition of 2 people who had been through the same thing and hadn't known it about each other until right now. Tyler looked away first. His jaw was very tight for a 12-year-old. The phone call in the back stopped. A pause. Footsteps. Brandon Voss came around the partition wearing his black uniform, his belt crisp, his face in the professional configuration he wore for classes. He looked at the room. He looked at Ethan. He looked at the parents. Something moved through his face too fast to catch. "We're about to start class," he said. His voice was steady, professionally steady, the kind of steady that requires effort. "If there are concerns you'd like to address, I'd be happy to schedule." "I don't need a schedule," Ethan said. "I need 5 minutes. Mr. Cole, I think the appropriate—" "My son is standing here on crutches," Ethan said. He said it quietly, the way he said everything that mattered. "Because of something that happened in this room 2 days ago. These parents are here because something happened to their children in this room that their children were afraid to tell them. I think 5 minutes is a reasonable request." Brandon looked at his parents. Ethan watched him calculate, watched him measure the room the way a man measures a room when he's trying to figure out if he still controls it. He didn't control it anymore. That much was already clear. But he hadn't accepted it yet. "Whatever concerns you have," Brandon said, turning slightly toward the parents, going past Ethan, going over his head, the way a person goes over the head of someone they're trying to minimize. I want you to know that I take the safety of every student in this program extremely seriously. What happened Saturday was a training accident. These things happen in contact sports. I've already spoken with my insurance. Brandon. Patricia Reeves's voice cut across the room. Clean and level, the voice of a doctor delivering information. My son has bruised ribs that he told me came from sparring. He told me last night that they came from you, after the tap. The room went very quiet. Tyler Reeves stared at the floor. Brandon looked at Patricia. He opened his mouth. Don't, Patricia said. Not angry, just precise. Don't tell me it was training. I'm a physician. I've seen bruised ribs. I've also seen what happens to kids who are taught that telling the truth about their injuries is weakness. Brandon closed his mouth. Danny Reeves, who had been standing slightly behind his wife with his arms crossed and the look of a man keeping himself on a very short leash, said, Tyler, come here. Tyler crossed the mat. He stood next to his father. He didn't look up. Danny put his hand on his son's shoulder. He kept his eyes on Brandon. He looked up to you, Danny said. His voice was different from his wife's rougher, less controlled, the voice of a man who works with his hands and is not used to needing words for things. 6 months. Every night at dinner. Brandon said this. Brandon thinks that. We thought... He stopped, started again. We thought you were the thing he needed. The silence in the room had a texture now. The younger children were very still. The assistant instructor Cole had moved to the far wall and was doing absolutely nothing because there was nothing correct to do, and he was smart enough to know it. Noah was watching Brandon, not with hatred. That was the thing Ethan noticed, the thing that made something in his chest ache. His son was watching the man who had hurt him with something more complicated than hatred, something that looked almost like curiosity, like he was trying to understand how a person arrived at being this. Brandon looked at this room. He looked at the parents. He looked at the children on the mat who were watching him with the enormous, unfiltered attention of kids who don't yet know how to pretend. He started. I'm going to be very direct, Ethan said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. He simply spoke in the voice that had once in a very different context been used to give information in situations where information determined outcomes. You have a choice right now. You can do what you know is right, or you can keep doing what you've been doing and live with what that costs you. I'm not talking about me. I'm not talking about a fight. I'm talking about these kids. He gestured slightly toward the mat. Some of them are 8 years old. They're watching you right now decide what kind of man you are. And whatever you decide in the next 60 seconds is going to be in their heads for a long time. Brandon looked at this mat. He looked at the 8 children watching him. His jaw moved. I need a minute, he said. Take it, Ethan said. Brandon walked to the back of the room. He stood at the far wall, his back to everyone, and was still. Ethan watched the line of his shoulders. He had stood behind men before in different circumstances and learned to read a lot from the shape of someone's back. He watched Brandon's breathing slow. He watched him raise one hand and press it flat against the wall and hold it there like he was steadying something. 30 seconds. Then Brandon turned around. His face was different, not destroyed, not broken. Different in the way that a face is different when something behind it has shifted, when the story a person has been telling themselves has finally run into something it can't explain away. He walked back to the center of the room. He looked at Noah first. What I did on Saturday, he said. He stopped, cleared his throat. What I did on Saturday was wrong. I went past the tap. I knew you tapped. I kept going. A pause. There's no version of training philosophy that makes that okay. I've been telling myself there was for a long time. There isn't. The room was completely silent. I've been telling a lot of things to myself for a long time, Brandon said. His voice had lost the professional quality. What was underneath it was younger, less certain, more human. About toughness. About what it means to push people. About the difference between making someone better and making someone afraid. He paused again. I think I stopped knowing the difference somewhere. I don't know exactly when. Tyler Reeves made a sound, not loud. But in the silence of that room, everyone heard it. A small, involuntary sound, the kind that comes out of a person when something they've been holding very tightly gets suddenly lighter. Brandon looked at Tyler. "The things I said," Brandon said. "About boys who went home to their parents. About what that meant. About weakness." He shook his head slowly. "That was wrong. I was wrong. Going to your parents when something is hurting you is the right thing to do. It is always the right thing to do. I taught you the opposite, and I'm sorry." Tyler Reeves was crying. I was trying not to. He had his chin down and his eyes hard, the way 12-year-old boys make their eyes hard when they're trying to be older than they are. But the tears were there anyway, falling fast and quiet, and Danny Reeves's hand on his son's shoulder tightened until his knuckles went white. Ellen Park's daughter Jessica had both arms around her mother's waist, and her face turned into her jacket. Noah was still watching Brandon. Still with that expression that wasn't hatred. His face was unreadable in the way that faces become unreadable when too many things are happening in them at once. Brandon looked at Noah. "I owe you the most," he said. "I singled you out, repeatedly, in front of your classmates. I said things about your mindset, your commitment, your potential things. I said in front of other people because I wanted to demonstrate something. Because making an example of someone felt like teaching." He met Noah's eyes directly, the first honest thing he'd done in days. It wasn't teaching. It was cruelty with a good cover story. "And your knee—" He stopped. "Your father was right. I knew you tapped. I'm sorry, Noah." Noah stood on his crutches in the middle of a martial arts dojo on a Tuesday morning and heard the man who had spent 4 months making him feel like he wasn't enough say that he was wrong. He didn't cry. He nodded once slowly with a dignity that was so complete it made 3 of the watching parents look away because it was too much to hold eye contact with. "Okay," Noah said quietly. "Just that. Just okay. Not forgiveness, not dismissal. Just the acknowledgement of a person who has received something they were owed and is deciding what to do with it at their own pace." Ethan looked at his son and felt the particular devastating pride of a parent watching their child be better than the situation required. Brandon looked at Ethan. "I owe you an apology too," he said. "I called parents last night and told them." "I know what you told them," Ethan said. "I'm going to correct it," Brandon said. "I'll call everyone I called last night, before noon today." Ethan nodded. "And the program," Brandon said. He looked around at the mat, the trophies, the children. "I don't know what comes next. I think—" He pressed his lips together. "I think I need to take a serious look at what I've been building here and whether it's what I said it was." Ellen Park spoke for the first time. "My daughter is 8 years old." She didn't say it with anger. She said it the way you state a fact that is also an argument. 8 years old. Whatever changes you make, I need to know they're real before she comes back. "That's fair," Brandon said. "It's more than fair," Ellen said. "It's the minimum." Patricia Reeves had her arms folded across her chest. She was looking at Brandon with the expression of someone who has made a clinical assessment and is still waiting for one more piece of information before closing the file. "Tyler is going to need to talk to someone," she said. "A professional, because of what he was taught about asking for help." She paused. "I want you to understand the downstream cost of what's been happening here. It's not just injuries. It's the things they were told about their injuries." Brandon took that without deflecting. "I understand," he said. "Good," Patricia said. Danny Reeves had not said another word since his statement about Tyler looking up to Brandon. He had stood with his hand on his son's shoulder, and his jaw set in the particular way of a man who has decided that the most powerful thing he can do right now is stand still and let other people talk. But now he looked at Tyler. "You okay, bud?" he said. His voice was rough. Tyler wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked up at his father. "Yeah," he said. His voice was still watery, but there was something else in it too. Something lighter. "Yeah, Dad, I'm okay." Danny Reeves pulled his son into his chest and held him for a moment in the middle of the dojo while everyone looked at the walls or the floor. Marcus appeared at 9:17. He came through the door for the regular junior class session, stopped dead, and immediately understood that he had walked into an aftermath. He looked at the parents, looked at the children, looked at Ethan, looked at Brandon. Brandon looked at him. "Marcus," he said. Marcus stood very still. "I know you called him," Brandon said. He said it without anger, with something that was almost relieved, the way a person sounds when they've decided to stop carrying something. "I should have called him myself." Marcus swallowed. He started. "You did the right thing," Brandon said. "I know that's a strange thing for me to say to you right now, but you did." Marcus looked at Ethan. Ethan gave him a small nod. Marcus let out a breath that might have been held since the night before. The next 40 minutes were not dramatic in the way the preceding ones had been. They were the less photogenic work of consequence. Parents exchanging phone numbers, questions being asked and answered, decisions being discussed that had no clean endings yet. Brandon sat with each family one at a time. He answered questions without the performance, without the trophies in his peripheral vision, seeming to mean the same thing they'd meant before. He looked diminished in the way that something looks when it stops being inflated. Smaller, but also more real. Ethan stood at the edge of all of it and did not interfere. This part wasn't his. He had done what he came to do. The rest of it belonged to these families and their children, and eventually to Brandon himself, who had a long and difficult road ahead if any of what had happened this morning was going to mean anything permanent. Around 10 o'clock. Most of the families started to leave. Ethan found Noah sitting on the bench along the wall with his crutches flat beside him, watching the room empty out. "How are you doing?" Ethan asked. Noah considered this seriously. "Weird," he said. "Good weird, I think. Like," he searched for it, "like something that was sitting on my chest just got lighter. But it's not gone, it's just lighter." "Yeah," Ethan said. "That sounds right." "Is that what you thought would happen? More or less?" Noah looked at him. "You've done something like this before, haven't you? Not the fighting. The other part. The part where you walk into a room and you hold your ground until the room changes." Ethan sat down next to him on the bench. "Different room," he said. "Different stakes. Same basic geometry." "What does that mean?" "It means the thing that makes people change their behavior is almost never the threat of force," Ethan said. "It's the moment they realize that the cost of not changing is higher than the cost of changing." Brandon didn't apologize because I scared him. He apologized because he looked at those kids on the mat and realized they were watching him decide who he was. Noah was quiet. "What if they hadn't been there?" he said. "The kids. What if it had just been us?" Ethan thought about it honestly. "I think he would have fought it longer," he said. "Maybe he wouldn't have gotten there today. Maybe he would have needed more time." He paused. "But I think the thing was already in there. The knowing. Most people who do damage like that, they know it. They've just built enough around it that they don't have to look at it directly. All I did was clear the space." "You cleared the space," Noah repeated slowly, like he was putting the phrase somewhere he could find it later. "And the fight last night was a different kind of clearing," Ethan said. Noah looked at his crutches. "Tyler's going to need time," he said. "Yeah. So am I." He said it without self-pity, just as a fact. "Yeah," Ethan said. "You will. That's okay." They sat together for a moment in the emptying room. Then Marcus appeared in front of them. He was holding his training bag and looking at Noah with the direct discomfort of a person who has something they need to and has been trying to figure out how to say it since they walked in the door. "Hey," Marcus said to Noah. "Hey," Noah said back. Marcus started. He stopped. He tried again. "I knew. When it happened to you, I knew it wasn't okay. And He looked at the floor. "I didn't say anything. In the room. I looked away." Noah looked at him. "I know," Noah said. "I should have—" "Yeah," Noah said. "No anger in it. Just honesty. But you called my dad, so—" Marcus looked up. "So we're okay," he said. Noah held his gaze for a moment. "We're getting there," he said. Marcus nodded. He shifted his bag on his shoulder. He looked at Ethan. "Mr. Cole," he said. "Marcus." "What happens to this place now?" Marcus asked. He gestured vaguely at the dojo, the mat, the trophies, the space itself. "Like, does it just what happens to all of it?" Ethan looked around the room. "That's up to the people who decide to stay or go," he said. "And up to Brandon. Whether he means what he said today, or whether he meant it the same way he meant everything else he said in here. That takes time to know." "Do you think he meant it?" Marcus asked. "Direct. Young enough to ask directly." Ethan thought about it without rushing. "I think he meant it this morning," he said. "I think he's going to have a hard time meaning it every morning after this one, and some mornings he probably won't." He paused. "That's not cynicism. That's just how change works. It doesn't arrive and stay. You have to keep choosing it." Marcus absorbed this. "Are you going to come back?" he asked. "Like to check." "I'm going to be around," Ethan said. "I live here." Marcus almost smiled. "That's not really an answer." "No," Ethan agreed. "It isn't." The dojo had almost fully emptied now. Brandon was in the back. They could hear him on the phone, his voice different than it had been when they'd arrived. More tired, more real. The call he was making sounded like the one he'd promised to make, the correction to the narrative, the harder conversation that followed the dramatic one. Noah pushed himself upright on the crutches. He looked around the room one last time. He looked at the trophies on the wall. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Always," Ethan said. "The trophies," Noah said. "He has 18. All those wins. He was actually good, right? Like technically. He was actually good at what he does." "He was," Ethan said. "So how does someone who's that good at something still—" Noah stopped, tried to get the question right. "How does someone get that good and still end up this wrong?" Ethan stood. He put on his jacket. "Because being good at a thing," he said, "is not the same as being good at knowing what the thing is for." He looked at the trophies. He thought the martial arts were about winning, about proving something, about being the most dangerous person in the room. But that was never what they were for. And so he got better and better at the wrong version of a real thing. He paused. That happens to people, in a lot of different fields. When you optimize for the wrong goal, you can get very good, very fast, and still end up somewhere that has nothing to do with where you were supposed to be going. Noah stood next to him, looking at the trophies. "Is that what happened in the military?" he said. "To some people." A long pause. "Yeah," Ethan said. "To some people. But not to you." Ethan looked at the wall, at the 18 trophies reflecting the overhead light, at his son's reflection in one of the plaque's crutches, and all standing straight. "I knew what it was for," he said. "That was the only thing that saved me." They walked out together. The Texas morning had gone warm, the kind of warm that sneaks up on you in late summer, that is mild in the shade and real in the sun. Ethan held the door. Noah crouched through, in the parking lot. Patricia Reeves was still there, leaning against her car with her phone in her hand. Tyler was in the back seat, visible through the window. He was looking at his phone, but in the way that kids look at phones when they're not actually looking at the phone, when they're somewhere else, and the phone is just a place to put their eyes. Patricia looked up when Ethan came out. "There's a parent board," she said, "for the dojo. I don't know if you know that. There are 6 parents on it, and according to the registration paperwork, they have oversight of the program standards." She paused. "I made some calls this morning before we came. 3 of those 6 parents are willing to call an emergency review. They need 1 more to have a quorum." Ethan looked at her. "I'm not on the board," he said. "No," she said. "But Danny is. He's been on it since Tyler enrolled." She glanced back at her, at Tyler's silhouette. He just didn't know what the board was actually supposed to be doing. Danny Reeves, who had walked out a few minutes ahead of them, heard this from near his truck. He turned around. "I'll call the other parents today," he said. He said it simply, without ceremony, the way men say things when the decision is already made, and the words are just the paperwork. "We'll get the review scheduled." Patricia nodded. She looked at Ethan. "Thank you," she said. "For last night. For this morning. For—" She stopped. For not doing more than you needed to. I think that matters. Ethan looked at her. I didn't do this, he said. You did. All of you. I just walked through the door first. She didn't argue with him, but the way she looked at him said she didn't entirely agree. She got in her car. Ethan and Noah walked to the truck. Noah got in slowly, getting the crutches situated, his jaw tight with the effort. Ethan closed the door for him, walked around to the driver's side, got in. He sat for a moment without starting the engine. Dad, Noah said. Yeah, what you said in there, about knowing what it was for. He paused. Do you still know? Ethan looked in at the windshield. What it was for, he repeated. What you are for, Noah said. More precisely. Like what you do, what you are, whatever that thing is that you didn't lose. He was looking straight ahead too. Two coal men looking at a windshield in a Texas parking lot. You know what it's for? It wasn't a question, but it felt like it needed an answer. Ethan started the truck. Yeah, he said. I do. What is it? Noah asked. Ethan put the truck in reverse. He looked in the rearview mirror, checked the lot, started to back out. You, he said. Noah was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of pressure, he said. You can handle it, Ethan said. And for the first time since Saturday, since the sweep, the mat, the clinic, the crutches, the night he lay in bed, listening to his father talk to a stranger through the wall about what had happened to him. Noah Cole laughed. Not big, not long, but real. And Ethan drove them home through the Tuesday morning through the Texas light, and the truck radio played something soft, and the road was quiet, and his son was in the passenger seat, laughing, and everything that was broken was still broken, but the braking had stopped. That mattered. That was enough for today. But he knew the way. Men who have paid attention to human nature for a long time know things that the story was not finished. Brandon Voss had said the right words this morning. He had meant them probably in the moment. But meaning something in the moment and building something on it were two entirely different constructions. And there were people invested in the old version of this story. People with money in the program, with pride, invested in the trophies, with reasons to want the narrative that was more comfortable. The board review was coming. And there would be people on that board who had not been in that room this morning. And those people would have their own ideas about what was worth protecting. Ethan drove home. He thought about that. He thought about the trident on his arm. He thought about what his team leader had said years ago after the debrief in the room he still sometimes saw in dreams. He had said the job isn't done when the situation resolves. The job is done when the people who are at risk are genuinely safe. Not just today, tomorrow, and the one after that. Ethan had taken that seriously then. He took it seriously now. He pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, sat. Noah looked at him. You're thinking about something, he said. Always, Ethan said. Something specific. Ethan looked at the house, at the front door, at the window of Noah's room visible from the driveway, the blinds still half down from last night. I'm thinking, he said carefully, that the morning went well, and that I want to make sure it stays that way. Noah looked at him sideways. What does that mean? He said. Ethan opened the door, got out. It means, he said, looking back at his son over the roof of the truck, that we're not done yet. The board review was scheduled for Thursday at 7 in the evening. Danny Reeves called Ethan at 2 in the afternoon on Tuesday to tell him. His voice had the clipped efficiency of a man who had spent the last 4 hours making calls he didn't enjoy making and was reporting results instead of feelings. 6 members on the board, Danny said. 4 agreed to the emergency review. 1 abstained, that's Karen Whitfield. Her son is one of Brandon's advanced students, and she's been in the program 3 years. The 6th is a man named Gary Pruitt. He runs the insurance brokerage on 5th Street. He called me back and told me this review was unnecessary and potentially libelous. Pruitt, Ethan said. I know who he is. He's also Brandon's largest private sponsor, Danny said. He paid for the last tournament team's travel expenses. His name is on a plaque in there. Ethan looked at the plaque in his memory. He had seen it. Hadn't paid it particular attention. Now it reorganized itself in his understanding of the situation. When did he call you? Ethan asked. 40 minutes after I told the board members, Danny said. Which tells you someone on the board called him before I finished my own calls. Karen Whitfield, Ethan said. That would be my guess, Danny said. Look, the review happens regardless. We have quorum without them. But Pruitt is going to show up Thursday, and he's going to push back, and he has money and a relationship with the County Athletics Commission, and I think you need to know that going in. I appreciate it, Ethan said. One more thing, Danny said. He paused in a way that meant the next thing mattered. Pruitt made a comment. On the phone with me. He said that the man who broke into the dojo and assaulted the instructor shouldn't be within 50 feet of any youth athletics facility in this county. A silence. He used the word assaulted, Ethan said. He did. Ethan stood in his kitchen. The afternoon light was doing something specific through the window, and he was aware of it without looking at it. Danny, he said. Thank you. I'll be there Thursday. He hung up. He stood for a moment. Then he picked up his phone again and called a number he hadn't called in 4 years. It rang 3 times. Ethan Cole, said the voice on the other end. A woman's voice, dry and precise, with the slight compression of someone who processes a lot of information quickly and has learned to treat surprise as inefficient. I was wondering when you were going to call. Hello, Sandra, Ethan said. Sandra Kress had been a JAG officer, Judge Advocate General's Corps, the military's legal arm for 11 years before transitioning to private practice in Austin. She had represented 3 members of Ethan's former team in various capacities over the years. She had also once represented Ethan himself in a matter he never discussed. She was the kind of lawyer who charged more than most people in small Texas towns ever encountered, and who was worth 3 times what she charged. I heard about your situation, she said. How? Ethan asked. Russ Hartley's wife's book club, Sandra said completely seriously. Small town. Also, I have a Google alert for your name for exactly these kinds of moments. You have a Google alert for my name. I have one for every client who I think is eventually going to need me again, she said. You've been on it for 4 years. Talk to me. He talked to her for 22 minutes. She asked 6 questions, all of them precise, none of them wasted. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Pruitt's claim of assault is a problem if it gets traction, she said. The actual legal exposure is minimal. Marcus's testimony, your injuries versus Brandon's the sequence of events, you'd be fine. But the word itself is a weapon. If it gets into the board meeting as an established fact rather than an accusation, it changes the room. I know, Ethan said. I'm going to send you a letter, Sandra said. You'll have it in your email in an hour. It documents the actual sequence of events based on what you've just told me, puts it into legal language, and names Marcus as a witness. You take it to the board meeting. If Pruitt uses the word assault, you hand the letter to the board chair. It doesn't win arguments on its own, but it shifts the burden of proof, and it signals that you're not a man who showed up to a dojo in a rage. You showed up with a request and were denied. Thank you, Ethan said. Don't thank me yet, Sandra said. Pruitt has relationships on the county commission. If Brandon wants to fight this, he has a path that doesn't require being right. It just requires being connected. A pause. Is there anything else I should know? Anything from before that could be used against you? Ethan knew what she was asking. Nothing on record, he said. Good, Sandra said. Keep it that way. Another pause. Ethan? Yeah. You did this for your kid, she said. It wasn't a question, but it had the shape of one. Yes, he said. Good, she said again. That's the only version of this story that wins. She hung up. He looked at his phone for a moment. Then he heard Noah's door open down the hall and the sound of crutches on hardwood, and his son appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking at him with the look of someone who has been awake and listening for longer than they're going to admit. How bad? Noah said. Manageable, Ethan said. That's not good, is it? It means there's work to do, Ethan said. That's different from bad. Noah came into the kitchen and sat at the table. He put his crutches against the wall with the practiced ease of someone who has already incorporated them into his body language. He looked at his father. Tell me, he said. Ethan sat across from him. He told him. All of it. Pruitt the assault claimed the board dynamics the call with Sandra. He told it plainly without softening the way he would have told it to anyone he respected enough to give the truth to. Noah listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, Noah said, "So there's a man who has money in Brandon's program who's going to try to make you the villain." "Yes. And if he succeeds, nothing changes. The review goes nowhere. Brandon keeps his license, and the story in town is that some angry mechanic attacked a martial arts instructor." "More or less?" "What do we do?" Ethan noticed the we. He had noticed it the first time Noah used it at 9 o'clock this morning in the truck, and he had noticed it each time since. He didn't comment on it. He just registered it the way you register something that matters. "We go to the meeting Thursday," Ethan said. "We tell the truth. We let Sandra's letter do the work it was built to do, and we see what the board is actually made of." "And if they're made of nothing," Noah said, bluntly. 16 years old and already capable of bluntness without cruelty, which was something Ethan had been trying to model for years and was obscurely moved to see arriving naturally. "Then we go to the State Athletics Commission," Ethan said, "and we bring the parents. And if the commission is connected to Pruitt too..." Ethan looked at his son. "Then we find out what journalists are interested in," he said. Noah blinked. "You'd go to the press." "I'd go wherever the truth has the best chance of being heard," Ethan said. "That's not dramatic. That's just navigation." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Tyler's mom is a doctor," he said slowly. "And she has a kid with documented injuries. And she's already angry. She's a better witness than either of us." Ethan looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "She is." "You should call her," Noah said. "Before Thursday. Let her know what Pruitt is doing so she's not surprised by it in the room." Ethan held his son's gaze. "When did you start thinking like this?" he said. Noah shrugged, but there was something almost pleased in it. "I've been watching you think like this for 3 days," he said. "It's not that complicated. You see what the actual obstacles are, and you address them in order." "That's most of it," Ethan said. "What's the rest?" "You have to be okay with people being angry at you while you're doing it," Ethan said. "You have to be okay with being misread, with the story being wrong for a while before it gets right. A lot of people stop when it gets uncomfortable. They either back down or they escalate in ways that make them the problem. The move is neither. The move is to stay exactly where you are and keep being clear." Noah looked at him. "Is that hard?" he said. "Every time," Ethan said. Wednesday passed in the strange liminal way of days before things. Ethan worked. He went under 3 different trucks and solved 2 problems and left one unresolved because it needed a part that wouldn't arrive until Friday. He made lunch. He made dinner. He helped Noah ice his knee and ran through the physical therapy exercises the clinic had given them and said nothing when Noah winced because Noah didn't want it acknowledged, and Ethan had learned a long time ago that there were kinds of pain that got worse when you named them. That night, Marcus came to the door. He was wearing street clothes, jeans, and a hoodie, 17 years old, and looking younger, standing on the front step, with the particular posture of someone who is not sure they were supposed to come, but came anyway. "Hey," he said. "Hey," Ethan said. "Come in." Marcus came in. He stood in the living room and looked around with the reflexive assessment of a young person in an unfamiliar adult space. Processing the details, the lack of excess, the shelf with 3 books and a photograph and nothing decorative for its own sake. "I heard about Pruitt," Marcus said. "News moves fast," Ethan said. "There's a group chat," Marcus said. "The older students. Brandon added me 2 years ago and never removed me, so I'm still in it." He pulled out his phone. He didn't say anything directly about Thursday, but he sent a message to the group last night and it... Marcus held out the phone. Ethan read the message. It was subtle. Brandon was too smart to be direct, but the architecture of it was clear a statement about the program's reputation, about outside interference, about the years of work and community building that certain individuals were attempting to dismantle. He used phrases like, "people who don't understand this culture and process that protected everyone involved." He didn't name Ethan. He didn't name anyone. He didn't have to. Ethan handed the phone back. He's organizing the students, Marcus said. Some of them are going to come Thursday, to the board meeting. Not to say anything specific, just to be there. To be a visible demonstration of support. How many? Maybe 10. The old ones, the ones who've been there longest. The ones who... Marcus stopped. The ones who have the most invested in the narrative. Ethan nodded. Marcus, he said. Are you one of them? Marcus looked at him directly. No, he said. I'm here, aren't I? You are, Ethan said. But I want you to know. Marcus sat down on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, looking at his hands. Some of those guys are not bad people. Okay. Like I've trained with them for 2 years. They're not like disciples of evil or whatever. They believe in Brandon. They've seen him do real good things. He has done real good things. That's the part that makes this complicated. Ethan sat across from him. Tell me, he said. Marcus looked up. Like there's a kid named Devin. He's 15. He came to the dojo 14 months ago. His dad was gone. His mom was working 2 jobs and he was heading somewhere bad, like genuinely. And Brandon took him in. He trained with Devin personally. He didn't charge the family full tuition. Devin is different now. Like genuinely measurably different. More focused, more confident, better grades. Marcus shook his head. If you told Devin right now that Brandon was the villain in this story, Devin would not believe you, Ethan said. He'd fight you, Marcus said. Literally, he'd fight for Brandon. Because Brandon did something real for him, Ethan said. Yes. Ethan was quiet for a moment. That's the hardest part of this, he said. And it's the part that most people skip over because it's easier to make Brandon a simple thing. A villain. A predator. A bad man. He paused. He's not a simple thing. He did real good and real damage, sometimes to the same people, sometimes in the same week. That's what makes him dangerous. And it's what makes Thursday difficult. Because some of the people defending him have legitimate reasons to defend him, Marcus said. Yes, Ethan said. Which means if Thursday turns into a war, if it becomes Brandon's supporters against the parents who were hurt, everybody loses. Devin loses. Tyler loses. The kids who were helped and the kids who were hurt both lose. Marcus was looking at him with the concentrated attention of someone who is absorbing something they hadn't expected to find. So what does winning look like? Marcus said. Ethan thought about it. Winning, he said, is Brandon stays, voluntarily, with real oversight, with a co-instructor or a supervisor, with a parent board that actually functions, with clear protocols about contact and consent, and when a tap ends a round. He paused. The goal was never to destroy the dojo. The goal is to make it what it claimed to be. Marcus sat with that. You think he can do that? He said. Be that. I think Tuesday morning was real, Ethan said. Whether he can sustain what he started Tuesday morning, I don't know. That's his job, not mine. And if he can't, then the parents and the board will make the decision that protects the kids, Ethan said. And that's the right outcome too. It's just a harder road. Marcus nodded slowly. Can I come Thursday? He said. I know I'm not a parent. I know I'm just a student. But I was in that room Saturday night. And if someone needs to say what they saw. You can come, Ethan said. And yes, if someone asks what happened Saturday night, we'd be grateful. Marcus nodded. He stood. He pulled his hoodie straight. At the door he paused. Mr. Cole, he said. The triangle choke, Saturday night. He stopped. Where did you actually learn that? A beat. Virginia, Ethan said. What's in Virginia? Marcus asked. Ethan opened the door. Training, he said. Marcus stepped out into the night. Thursday came like Thursday comes, no differently than any other morning, which is always somehow surprising given what Thursdays sometimes contain. Ethan made coffee. He made eggs. He read the letter Sandra had sent, which was 3 pages and immaculate, and put it in a folder. He put the folder in his jacket. He put on clean clothes, not dressed up, not performing anything, just clean. Noah came to breakfast without the crutches. Ethan looked at his knee. It's better, Noah said before Ethan could ask. Not 100%, but better. He sat down. I want to walk in there without the crutches. Ethan understood without asking why. He poured the coffee. At 6:45, his phone buzzed. Patricia Reeves. He answered. Pruitt called me this morning, she said. Her voice was the controlled voice, the doctor voice, but with something underneath it that was not controlled at all. What did he say? Ethan asked. He said he had spoken with his attorney, and that the board review, if it proceeded as a disciplinary action rather than a program review, could expose individual board members to personal liability, she said. He used the phrase chilling effect on volunteer service. He also said, and this is the part I want you to hear directly, he said that the parents being coordinated by Ethan Cole should be aware that Mr. Cole has a history of violence that extends beyond Saturday's incident. The kitchen was very quiet. A history of violence, Ethan said. That's what he said, Patricia said. He didn't specify. He left it there, which I think was deliberate. Implications without evidence. Ethan processed this. Are you intimidated? He asked. A pause. Then, with a dry directness that reminded him of Sandra. I'm a woman who has worked in hospital emergency rooms for 11 years, Mr. Cole. I've testified in court against men who were significantly more frightening than Gary Pruitt and his attorney. Another pause. But I want you to know it happened. And I want you to know that whatever history he's implying, if it becomes a factor tonight, I'm going to need to know what it is. Ethan held the phone. Sandra Kress is my attorney, he said. If anything he says tonight needs a legal response, she's available by phone. Her number is in my folder, and you're welcome to it. He paused. As for the history he's implying, there's nothing on record, nothing criminal, nothing that can be documented and used. What he's doing is using the shape of a secret to create a shadow. It only works if people don't look directly at it. Then we look directly at it, Patricia said. Yes, Ethan said. 7 o'clock, she said. I'll be there, he said. He put the phone down. Noah was watching him from across the table. Pruitt, Noah said. Yeah. He's trying to make people afraid of you before the meeting starts. Yes. Is it going to work? Ethan picked up his coffee. Depends on the room, he said. The board meeting was held in the community room of the county library, a beige room with folding chairs and fluorescent lighting, and the particular acoustics of spaces designed for information rather than performance. It was the kind of room where school budgets got argued and zoning disputes got aired, and local life conducted the unglamorous business of governing itself. By 6:50, 43 people were in the room. Ethan had not expected 43. He had expected the 6 board members, the handful of parents he knew about, maybe Brandon and Pruitt and a few others. What he had not fully accounted for was the group chat. The older students had come as Marcus had warned, but so had their parents' parents, who had not been called, who had arrived on their own, who had heard the word assault and driven to the library to find out what was happening to the program their children were part of. Not all of them were hostile, but not all of them were not. Ethan stood at the side of the room and did what he always did in unfamiliar tactical environments. He read it. He counted people and assessed body language and identified the clusters. The parents who came in, angry. The parents who came in scared the older students who sat together in a row with their arms folded. The board members who arrived in pairs and spoke quietly to each other before taking their seats at the table at the front. Brandon sat in the second row. He was in street clothes, not his uniform, which Ethan read as a deliberate choice, a choice toward humility, or at least the appearance of it. He sat with his hands on his knees and looked at the floor until the meeting was called to order. Gary Pruitt sat in the front row. He was a large man, late 50s, with the build of someone who had once been athletic and had replaced the muscle with something denser and more settled. He had a sport coat and a legal pad, and the manner of a man who had been the most prepared person in many rooms and expected to be the most prepared person in this one. He looked at Ethan once across the room when Ethan walked in. The look said, "I know more about you than you think." Ethan looked back at him with nothing. Not aggression, not challenge, nothing. The blank regard of a man who has had people try to intimidate him with eye contact and has learned that the secret to defeating it is to simply not participate. Pruitt looked away first. The board chair was a woman named Helen Cho, a retired school principal in her mid-60s with reading glasses on a chain, and the expression of someone who has managed hundreds of difficult meetings and found them all ultimately similar. She called the meeting to order with a clarity that quieted the room. "This is an emergency review of the operational standards and safety protocols of the Black Eagle Martial Arts Academy," Helen said. "We have 4 board members present, and quorum is established. 2 board members." She glanced at her notes. Karen Whitfield and Gary Pruitt have indicated they are not participating in this review in their board capacity, though they may speak during the public comment portion. Pruitt's jaw tightened. He had expected to vote. He had come prepared to vote. Discovering that he had already been procedurally removed from the voting structure did something to his face that he couldn't entirely conceal. Karen Whitfield, seated beside him, put her hand briefly on his arm. Helen Cho proceeded. The next 20 minutes were procedural. The formal documentation of Noah's injury submitted through Sandra's letter, which Ethan had given to Helen 40 minutes before the meeting started. The clinic report. The statement from the student witness, which Marcus had written out in longhand on notebook paper, and which, when Helen read the relevant passage aloud, made several parents in the room exchange looks. Then Helen opened the floor for parent comment. Patricia Reeves went first. She stood up with the confidence of someone who has addressed difficult rooms professionally and laid out Tyler's situation with clinical precision. The bruised ribs, the timeline, the specific language Brandon had used about boys who went home to their parents. She did not editorials. She did not raise her voice. She presented information the way she presented diagnoses, and the room heard it the way people hear things they cannot dispute, because the source gives them no foothold for dispute. When she sat down, the room was different. Ellen Park went second. She was briefer and less polished and more devastating for it. She talked about her 8-year-old daughter and the way Jessica had started flinching in car rides whenever someone braked quickly, and the therapist who had said the flinching was a startle response, and the startle response that had developed in the last 6 months since Jessica joined the junior program. The third parent who stood up was a man Ethan didn't know. Heavy-set 40s wearing a Steelers cap and the look of someone who doesn't usually go to meetings. His name was Phil Darrow, and his son was 14 and had been with the program for a year and was not injured, not visibly damaged, but who had changed in a way Phil couldn't name until tonight. He said he stopped telling us things about his day at the dojo 6 months ago. He just stopped. And I thought that was just being a teenager. I'm sitting here tonight wondering if it was something else. Pruitt spoke during the gap before the next parent could stand. He did not ask for the floor. He simply took it the way men who are accustomed to being heard take floors, by beginning to speak at the right volume and trusting that everyone else will adjust. "I have a great deal of respect for the concerns being raised tonight," he said. His voice was the voice of a man who has given money to things and expects that money to grant him a particular kind of credibility. "And I want to be clear that the safety of every child in this program is of the utmost importance to me personally." He paused for exactly the right length of time. "But I think before this board takes any action that could permanently damage a 12-year institution with an extraordinary record of youth development in this community, we need to ask some serious questions about the source and the motivation of the complaints being made tonight." He let that land. Specifically, he said, "I think this board needs to be aware that the individual who initiated this process, who entered this dojo, uninvited, who locked the door, who physically engaged the instructor, has a background that this community deserves to understand before extending him the authority of a complaint." He looked at Ethan. The room looked at Ethan. 43 people, and for a moment, the room's attention was a single thing pointing in one direction. Ethan stood up. He did not rush. He did not perform anything. He stood the way he stood on the mat with the kind of stillness that isn't passivity, but the thing that comes before action when action has been decided. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said. "I'm a diesel mechanic at Hartley & Sons Automotive. I've lived in this county for 7 years. I have one son, Noah, who is 16 years old and who came to this meeting tonight without his crutches because he wanted to walk in here on his own." He paused. "Mr. Pruitt is right that I have a background he wants this room to be aware of. I served in the United States Navy for 11 years. I was a member of a special operations unit for most of that service. I left with an honorable discharge. Another pause. There is nothing in my record, military or civilian, that constitutes assault. If Mr. Pruitt has documentation to the contrary, I invite him to present it. The room waited. Pruitt did not present documentation. Because there was no documentation. Because Pruitt had been counting on the shadow, and Ethan had turned on the light. Helen Cho looked at Pruitt over her reading glasses. "Do you have documentation, Mr. Pruitt?" she said, pleasantly, with the pleasantness of a woman who has managed hundreds of difficult meetings. Pruitt's legal pad was very still on his knee. "I have concerns," he said. "That's different," Helen said. She looked back at the room. Devon stood up. He was 15 and slight, and he stood the way young men stand when they are doing something that costs them something, but they have decided to pay it. "I want to say something," he said. Helen looked at him. "Go ahead, son." "Brandon helped me," Devon said. His voice was steady but young. "When I came here, I wasn't good. I was heading somewhere I don't want to think about. And Brandon saw something in me, and he trained me, and he didn't give up on me. And I'm standing here tonight because of that." He paused. "But I also—" He stopped. He looked at Noah. He looked at Tyler Reeves, who was sitting next to his father with his eyes down. "I also saw things, in the dojo, that I told myself were okay, because Brandon was who he was to me. And I don't—" He pressed his lips together. "I don't know if they were okay, and I think I should have asked that question sooner." The room was completely silent. Marcus, sitting 3 seats from Devon, was looking at the floor. Brandon was looking at Devon. And for the first time that evening, for the first time since any of this had started, Brandon Voss's face showed something that was not performance and not calculation and not the careful management of his own image. It showed grief. Real grief. The kind that comes when a person realizes the cost of their damage is not abstract, is not institutional, is not legal or financial, but is sitting right there in the second row. 15 years old, trying to figure out how to hold 2 true things at once. Brandon stood up. Helen looked at him. "Mr. Voss," she said carefully. "I know this isn't my turn," Brandon said. "I know that procedurally." "I'll allow it," Helen said. Brandon looked at Devon. "What you just said," he said quietly. "The courage that took—" He stopped. He pressed the back of his hand briefly against his mouth. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you that what I did was right, because I also helped you. Those aren't connected. They're 2 separate things, and they don't cancel each other out." He looked at the room, at the parents, at the board members, at Marcus and the older students sitting in a row. "I did good work here. I also did damage. Both of those things are true, and I have to hold both of them." He paused. "I'm asking this board to give me the chance to fix the damage, with oversight, with clear standards, with accountability that I've been avoiding for a long time." Another pause. "If you decide that's not enough, I understand, and I will comply with whatever decision this board makes, without lawyers, without appeals, without Gary making calls on my behalf." He glanced at Pruitt briefly. "I should have said that before tonight. I'm saying it now." Pruitt looked at Brandon. Brandon did not look back. In the silence that followed, Helen Cho took her reading glasses off and set them on the table and looked at the room with the expression of a woman who has been doing this long enough to know when the real moment of a meeting has arrived. "I'm going to ask the 4 voting board members to caucus," she said. "We'll be brief. I'd ask everyone to stay." The board members stepped out. The room sat with itself. Ethan sat down next to Noah. Noah looked at him. "Devon," he said quietly. "Yeah," Ethan said. "That took a lot." Ethan agreed. Noah was quiet for a moment. "Is it going to be enough?" Ethan looked at the door the board members had walked through. "I think so," he said. "But not because of what I did, or what Patricia did, or even what Brandon said." He paused. "Because of Devon." "Why Devon?" "Because he has every reason to protect Brandon," Ethan said quietly. "Brandon saved him. That's real. And he still stood up and said what he saw. That kind of witness." He stopped. That's the one that changes rooms. Noah looked at Devin, who was now sitting with his elbows on his knees and staring at nothing. Doing the work of a person who has just spent something important. Someone should say something to him, Noah said. Ethan looked at his son. Go ahead, he said. Noah looked at him. He stood up without the crutches slowly. He walked across the room carefully, his knees still not 100%, but his spine straight to where Devin was sitting. He stood in front of him. Devin looked up. Hey, Noah said. Hey, Devin said. A pause. That was hard, Noah said. Devin looked at his hands. Yeah. It helped, Noah said. Just I wanted you to know it helped. Devin was quiet for a moment. Then he said without looking up. Is your knee okay? Getting there, Noah said. Devin nodded, and the two of them sat down next to each other and didn't say anything else, and the room continued to breathe around them, and outside the board caucused, and inside the complicated true thing that all of this had been moving toward got slightly closer to having a shape. The board came back in 11 minutes. Helen Cho sat down, put her glasses back on, and folded her hands. This board has voted 3-1 to implement a mandatory operational review of the Black Eagle Martial Arts Academy, she said. Effective immediately, all contact training involving minor students will be supervised by a certified third-party observer. The program's consent and safety protocols will be rewritten with input from a licensed sports medicine professional and a child welfare advocate. Mr. Voss will undergo a mandatory course in trauma-informed instruction before resuming full solo teaching responsibilities. She looked at Brandon. Non-compliance with any of these measures will result in immediate suspension of the program's county affiliation. She looked at the room. This is not a punishment, she said. This is a structure. The difference matters. Pruitt left without speaking to anyone. Karen Whitfield left quietly without making eye contact. The room slowly became the aftermath of itself. People standing talking quietly, the particular loosening of a space where something tightly held has been released. Danny Reeves shook Ethan's hand. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Patricia found him near the door. Sandra's letter, she said. At the beginning. Helen having it before the meeting started. She paused. That was the right move. It was Sandra's idea, Ethan said. It was your call, Patricia said. He didn't argue. Marcus caught him near the exit. Devin, Marcus said. He didn't tell me he was going to do that. I know, Ethan said. He texted me after, Marcus said. He showed Ethan his phone. Devin's message was 3 words I had to. Ethan looked at it. Yeah, he said. What do we do now? Marcus asked. Ethan looked at the emptying room. At Brandon, who was speaking quietly with Helen Cho and one of the other board members, his posture different from anything Ethan had seen in him before. Not collapsed, not defensive, but genuinely smaller in the way that things become smaller when they stop performing size. At Noah near the door talking to Tyler Reeves. Tyler was talking more than Noah, which was a reversal, and Noah was listening with the slightly surprised expression of someone discovering that they are good at something they didn't know they were good at. Now, Ethan said, you go home, you rest, and on Saturday, you go back to training. Marcus blinked. Seriously, the dojo isn't the problem, Ethan said. It was never the dojo. The dojo is a room with a mat in it. What it needed was the right structure. He looked at Marcus. Be part of building the right structure. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Are you always like this? He said, somewhere between admiration and mild exasperation. Like what? Ethan said. Like calm, Marcus said. Like how are you this calm about everything? Ethan pulled his jacket on. Practice, he said. He found Noah at the door. His son looked at him with the look of someone who is tired in the specific, earned way that is completely different from ordinary tiredness, the way you feel after something real. Ready? Ethan asked. Yeah, Noah said. They walked out into the Thursday night. The air was the way Texas air is in late summer, warm and carrying something. Something you can't name, something between the day that just ended and the one that hasn't started yet. Noah walked to the truck without the crutches. Slow, a little unsteady, but walking. Ethan watched him and said nothing. Because sometimes the most important thing a father can do is walk beside someone and let them find their own footing. And sometimes that is harder than anything else. And sometimes it is the whole job. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Noah walked back into the dojo without crutches, without hesitation, and without telling me he was going to do it. I found out the way. I find out most things about my son after the fact, through the casual mention of something he's already decided, delivered over dinner, like it was nothing, like it was just another Tuesday. He said, "I went back today." I put down my fork. "How was it?" I asked. He thought about it with the seriousness he brings to things that matter to him. "Different," he said. "Good different." I picked my fork back up. That was all either of us needed to say about it. The truth is, I had been watching him for 3 weeks, the way fathers watch sons, after damage, carefully, without appearing to watch, measuring his sleep and his appetite, and the particular quality of his silences. Some silences are rest. Some silences are wait. I had been trying to distinguish between the two and mostly succeeding, and sometimes not. How was healing? The knee, yes. But the other thing too. The thing that doesn't show up on clinic reports but that a father can feel in the room when it's absent, and feel again when it starts to come back. It was coming back. Slowly. The way things come back when they come back honestly without being forced. He had started doing push-ups in his room again. I could hear them through the wall at night, the rhythm of it, the quiet count under his breath. He had never stopped wanting to be strong. Brandon had tried to make him feel like that wanting was a flaw. It wasn't a flaw. It was the best part of him, and watching it reassert itself night by night through the wall of his bedroom was one of the finest things I had witnessed in 7 years of being a father in this small Texas town. The dojo itself was different now. The board had moved quickly after Thursday. A woman named Dr. Cassandra Obi, a sports medicine physician out of Austin, with a specialty in youth athletics, and what her website described as a zero-tolerance framework for coercive training environments, had come in and spent 2 full days reviewing the program. She had rewritten the consent protocols. She had established clear tap-out rules with real consequences. She had installed a parent observation window and mandatory monthly review sessions with the board. Brandon had complied with all of it. Every single requirement. Without argument. Without the performance of compliance that is really just resistance wearing patience's clothes. I had been watching for that, the subtle pushback, the technical yes that conceals a practical no. I hadn't seen it. What I had seen through Marcus, who kept me informed without being asked to, was something I hadn't fully predicted. I had expected Brandon to comply. I had not expected him to change. Those are not the same thing. The first sign was Devon. Marcus told me about it on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after the board meeting, standing in my driveway, with his hands in his jacket pockets, and the expression of someone reporting something they find genuinely surprising. He asked Devon to teach the warm-up, Marcus said. I looked at him. Brandon asked Devon, Marcus said again, like he needed to say it twice to believe it. A 15-year-old kid. He asked him to lead the group warm-up, and then he stood in the back of the room and let Devon do it and didn't correct him once. I thought about what that cost Brandon. The man who had built a program around his own centrality, around the idea that his voice was the one that mattered. His technique was the one that was right. His approval was the thing everyone was working toward. To stand in the back of his own room and let a 15-year-old lead. That wasn't compliance. That was something else. How did Devon do? I asked. Marcus almost smiled. He was amazing, he said. Like he's got this way of explaining things where he makes the other kids feel like they already know how to do it. They just need to find it. Brandon was watching him, and you could see... Marcus stopped. You could see him realizing something. What? I said. That he'd been teaching wrong, Marcus said. Not the techniques, the relationship. He'd been teaching people to need him, and Devon was teaching people to trust themselves. I stood in my driveway in the Texas morning and let that settle. Is Brandon okay? I asked, because that was the honest question. Marcus thought about it. "I think he's sad," he said. Like genuinely sad. Not self-pity sad. More like he looked at what he built for 12 years and realized it was built on the wrong foundation, and now he has to decide if he loves the real thing enough to rebuild it. "Does he?" I asked. "I think so," Marcus said. "I think that's what Devon is. Devon is what he would have built if he'd been building the right thing from the start." I nodded. Marcus left. I stood in my driveway for a few minutes after. I thought about what Marcus had said, that Brandon was sad. Not self-pity sad. I knew the difference. Self-pity is a closed room. Real grief is a door. It hurts more, opens more, costs more, and is the only kind that leads anywhere worth going. I thought about my own version of that grief. The version I had lived for 10 years since leaving the military. The slow, patient work of becoming a person who didn't use the things he knew the way he had used them. The choosing every day of the quieter version of himself. The mechanic version. The breakfast-making version. The father. I had thought for a long time that choosing peace meant burying the other thing. I understood now that it meant integrating it, carrying it consciously, knowing what it was for. That was the thing I had been trying to explain to Noah in the truck outside the dojo when he asked me what I was for. I hadn't said it right then. I'd said you. Which was true, but incomplete. The fuller truth was the ability, the training, the particular capacity I carried. All of it was in service of the life I was building. Not separate from it. Not something I had to suppress. Something I had to direct. Like water through a channel rather than water against a wall. Brandon had it backwards for 12 years. He thought the strength was the point. He thought being the most dangerous person in the room was the achievement. I had made the same mistake once. In a different room, in a different life, I had confused being capable of something with being justified in doing it. It had cost me things I didn't talk about. It had cost other people things I thought about quietly and privately and would think about for the rest of my life. The difference was I had seen it. Eventually. Not immediately. It had taken time and a team leader who was honest enough to say something, and a year of silence after I left, and a small Texas town, and a boy who needed breakfast, and a reason. Brandon was seeing it now. At 28. Which was younger than I had been. Which meant the road ahead of him was longer, and also that there was more road. I went inside. I made coffee. I heard Noah's alarm go off at 7:15, and the sounds of him getting up, the morning sounds of a 16-year-old being alive in a house, which are among the best sounds I know. He came to breakfast. He sat down. He said, "Tyler called me last night." I looked at him. "He wants to start training again," Noah said. "Not at Black Eagle, somewhere else. He asked if I wanted to come." "What did you say?" Noah wrapped both hands around his juice glass, the way I wrap both hands around my coffee mug, a small mirroring I noticed a long time ago and have never pointed out because it would embarrass him. "I told him I was already going back to Black Eagle," Noah said, "and that he should come back too." "What did he say?" "He said he wasn't sure Brandon deserved another chance." I waited, and I said, Noah continued, that it wasn't really about what Brandon deserved. It was about whether the dojo was safe. And if it was safe, then the question of what Brandon deserved was separate from whether Tyler should train there. He paused. "Is that right?" I looked at my son. "Yeah," I said. "That's right." "He's thinking about it," Noah said. "Give him time," I said. "I told him that too," Noah said. He ate his eggs. I drank my coffee. And I thought, this is it. This is the whole point of all of it. Not the dojo, not the board meeting, not the conversation in the library with 43 people, and a man with a legal pad who tried to make my past into a weapon. This. My son at the breakfast table, having called his classmate, and said the right thing without asking me what the right thing was. I had not taught him that. Not directly. I had not sat him down and explained the ethics of giving people second chances, or the distinction between institutional safety and individual forgiveness. He had watched, and he had understood something that took me 38 years to articulate. That was the real outcome of this whole thing. Not Brandon's apology, not the board decision, not Pruitt leaving the room in silence. Those real. Those mattered. Those protected the next kid from the next thing. But this Noah on the phone with Tyler, finding the right words at 16 in the dark without a playbook. This was the thing I would carry. 2 days later, I got a call that I didn't expect. The number was a 512 area code Austin. I answered it, and a woman's voice said, "Mr. Cole, my name is Janet Holloway. I'm the executive director of the Texas Youth Athletics Safety Commission. I received a referral from Dr. Cassandra Obi regarding events at a martial arts academy in your county." I sat down. "I'm familiar with the situation," I said. "I believe you are," Janet said. Her voice was warm and precise, simultaneously the voice of someone who has been doing advocacy work long enough to know that being both is not a contradiction. Dr. Obi sent us her full report from the program review. It's not the worst we've seen. But some of the structural elements, the way the consent protocols, had eroded the culture around tapping and injury disclosure. Those are patterns we're seeing across multiple programs in the state. "I'm listening," I said. "I'd like to come meet with you," Janet said. "Not to investigate, not in any official capacity that puts you on record or requires anything formal. Dr. Obi said something about you that I want to understand better." "What did she say?" I asked. "She said you were the first parent who had ever come to her with a documented account that included not just what had happened, but why the structure had allowed it to happen." A pause. "Most parents come with an injury. You came with an analysis." I didn't say anything for a moment. "It was my son's analysis too," I said finally. "He's 16. He figured out a lot of this faster than I did." "I'd like to meet him as well," Janet said. "If he's willing." I looked at the hallway toward Noah's room. "I'll ask him," I said. I did ask him that evening. I told him the full context who Janet was, what the commission did, what she wanted, and why. Noah listened. Then he said, "She wants to use what happened here to fix something bigger." "Yes," I said. "Like make better rules for other dojos," he said. "So other kids don't. So other kids have better protection than you had," I said. "Before you got hurt." Noah was quiet. Then he said, "Yeah, I'll talk to her." Janet Holloway came on a Saturday. She drove 2 hours from Austin and sat at our kitchen table and drank my coffee. She said it was good, which I believed because she said it the same way people say things when they mean them, and she talked with both of us for 3 hours. She asked Noah questions that she didn't ask me questions about what it felt like inside the program day to day. What language Brandon had used, what the social dynamics were between students, how the culture around injury had been normalized. Noah answered with a specificity and a calm that I watched and did not interrupt. At one point, Janet said, "Were you ever afraid to speak up in the dojo?" Noah thought about it honestly. "I was afraid of what it meant," he said. "Not of what he'd do. I was afraid that if I said something hurt, it was because I was weak." He'd separated the feeling of pain from the permission to say so. Like you could feel it, but saying it meant you were less. Janet looked at him for a long moment. "That is the most precise description of coercive conditioning in youth athletics that I have heard in 11 years of doing this work," she said. Noah looked at her. "Is that good?" he said. "It means it'll help a lot of kids," she said. Noah looked at the table. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then it's good." Before she left, Janet talked to me alone for a few minutes, standing at the front door, while Noah was in the kitchen clearing dishes. "I want to ask you something personal," she said. "Go ahead," I said. "Dr. Obi's report mentions that you physically engaged the instructor the night before you brought the parents together," she said. She doesn't have details. She mentioned it because it contextualizes the instructor's behavior at the public apology, his willingness to speak his posture in the room. I said nothing. "I'm not asking you to document it," Janet said. "I'm asking you, and I want you to understand, this is completely off the record. Did you know when you went back that night that you might end up doing that?" I thought about the question honestly. "I went back for the apology," I said. "That was true when I walked in. It was still true when I locked the door." "And the rest?" she asked. I looked at the door frame. "He made a choice," I said. "I gave him the information he needed to make it. And then he made it. Janet looked at me. "You're a very specific kind of man," she said. "Not judgment, just observation, precise and complete." "I'm a mechanic," I said. She smiled. "You keep saying that," she said. "It keeps being true," I said. She left. I stood at the closed door for a moment. Then Noah came out of the kitchen drying his hands on a dish towel, looking at me with that expression of his. The one that means he's already figured out most of what happened and is asking about the rest. "What did she say?" he said. "She said you're going to help a lot of kids," I said. Noah nodded slowly, like he was deciding whether to accept that as enough. "Are you okay?" he said. I looked at my son. There it was again. The question he had started asking me somewhere in the middle of all this and hadn't stopped asking. "Are you okay, Dad?" Not the way kids used to ask it reflexively as a social placeholder. He asked it the way he asked everything now since the dojo, since the board meeting, since the 3 weeks of rebuilding things. He asked it like the answer mattered. "Yeah," I said. "You're thinking about something," he said. "Always," I said. He looked at me with the 16-year-old version of patience, which is a real kind, even if it has a shorter duration than the grown version. "Tell me," he said. I leaned against the wall. "I'm thinking about what I almost did," I said. "Not Saturday night, not the dojo. The thing I could have done if I'd let the wrong part of me run that night instead of the right part." Noah waited. "I could have hurt him badly," I said. "Not the way I did. More than that. I had the capability, and I had what felt in the moment like a justification. He hurt my kid. He was arrogant and cruel, and he had a room full of people who enabled him, and a town that gave him credibility he didn't deserve." I paused. All of that was true, and none of it would have made more damage the right answer. Noah was quiet for a long time. "What stopped you?" he said. I thought about it. "You," I said. "Not in the sentimental way. I mean, I thought about you watching. About what it would mean if you found out I had done something that was about my anger instead of your protection." I paused. "I've carried something for a long time, Noah. From before. From the military. I've done things in service of good orders that left marks I don't show anyone. And the thing I learned from carrying those marks is that the difference between necessary and excessive is not always visible in the moment. The way you make sure you stay on the right side of it is you decide the rule before you're in the situation." "What was the rule?" he asked. "Enough," I said. "Enough to be heard, not more." Noah was looking at me with the expression of someone who is storing something carefully. "That's a hard rule to keep," he said. "Yes," I said. "It is." He nodded. He went back to his room. I stood in the hallway for a while. 4 weeks after the board meeting, something happened that I did not expect, and that of all the things that came out of this, moved me most. Brandon Voss called me. Not his lawyer, not through an intermediary. Brandon. At 8 in the morning on a weekday while I was under a truck at Hartley & Sons. Russ came to get me. He said, "There's a call, says it's important." I came out from under the truck. I took the phone. "Mr. Cole," Brandon said. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me." "I'm listening," I said. A long pause. "I've been in therapy," he said, "since the week after the board meeting, twice a week." Another pause. "My therapist, she asked me to make a list of people I needed to have honest conversations with. People I'd hurt or affected or—" He stopped. "You're on the list." I waited. "I want to say something, and I want you to know it's not for the board. It's not for my license. It's not because my lawyer told me to." His voice was different from anything I had heard from him before. Not the instructor. Not the tournament champion. Just a man 38 talking into a phone. "I saw you on the mat that night. I saw what you were capable of, and you stopped. You could have. I knew after the first minute that you could have ended it differently, and you didn't." "No," I said. "I've been thinking about why," Brandon said. "For 4 weeks. I've been thinking about what kind of person makes that choice. Because I know what it costs to make it. I've been in enough situations to know that stopping when you don't have to stop is the harder thing." He paused. I want to know how you do it. Not tactically. I mean, where does it come from? The knowing when enough is enough. I sat on the edge of Russ's desk. I thought about it for a long time. It comes from knowing what you're for, I said finally. If you know what you're for, really know it, not the answer you give other people, but the one you actually navigate by. Then every decision has a reference point. You don't have to figure out in the moment whether to stop. You already know because you already know what the action is in service of. And if more damage doesn't serve it, you stop. Silence on the line. What are you for? Brandon asked. My son, I said. My son having a life that is honest and safe and built on real things. That's it, he said. That's enough, I said. That's more than enough. That's a full life's work right there. Brandon was quiet for a long time. I think I was for the trophies, he said. For a long time. I think I thought the trophies were the proof that I was worth something. And when you're for the trophies, every person who comes into the dojo is either a trophy or a threat to one. He paused. Devin isn't a trophy. No, I said. Devin is... He stopped. Devin is the first thing I've done in 12 years that had nothing to do with me. Then build from there, I said. Another long silence. Can I ask you something? He said. Yeah. Noah, he said. Is he okay? Like actually, not the party line. Is he actually okay? I looked out the window of Russ's office at the shop floor. At the trucks lined up the morning light on metal. The ordinary machinery of ordinary life doing its ordinary work. He's getting there, I said. He went back. Brandon was quiet. He came back to my dojo, he said. It wasn't a question, but it had the shape of one. Yeah, I said. Why? Brandon said. And I could hear in that one word, in the specific weight of it, that he was really asking, why would anyone trust me again? Why would someone I hurt come back? Because he's smarter than both of us, I said. He knows the difference between the room and the man. The room is good. The mat is good. The practice is good. He's separating the thing from the damage done to it. That's hard to do at 16. I'll take care of him, Brandon said. And the thing about the way he said it was that I believed him. Not because he'd earned total trust. Not because the last month had erased everything before it. But because I know the sound of a man who has seen himself clearly for the first time and made a decision on the other side of that seeing. I know that sound because I made it once in a room in Virginia in a year I don't talk about. I know, I said. We hung up. Russ was in the doorway. Brandon Voss, he said. Yeah, I said. How is that? I handed him his phone back. Good, I said. Strange, good. Russ studied me the way he had for 7 years with the patient, undemanding attention of a man who never pushes but never looks away. You okay? He said. I put on my work gloves. Yeah, Russ, I said. I'm okay. I went back under the truck. The work was the same as it had always been. The transmission problem was the same problem it had been before the phone call. The grease and the light and the smell of engine oil and the specific physical intelligence of figuring out what was broken and how to make it whole. All of that was exactly what it had been. But I was not exactly what I had been. Something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way things shift in stories when the lesson arrives with music and slow motion and everyone understands at once. The way things actually shift, which is quietly, incrementally in the space between one version of yourself and the one that comes after. I had spent 10 years building a life around the idea that strength was something to be managed, contained, pointed carefully away from the things it could damage. I had treated the part of me that had served and fought and survived as something adjacent to my real life, useful in emergencies, dangerous by default. What I understood now, what this week and this month, and my son's voice through the wall counting push-ups had shown me, was that it was not adjacent. It was not separate. It was not a compartment to be locked and checked periodically and locked again. It was me. All of me. The mechanic and the seal and the father and the man who stood on a mat and chose enough. Those were not different people taking turns in the same body. They were the same person, always with the same values running through all of it, and the values were what mattered. The values were what I was for. 3 months after the board meeting, Noah placed second in the regional junior tournament. He called me from the venue before I got there. I was running late. A truck had needed an emergency fix at 6 in the morning, and I had pushed through it and was still 40 minutes out when his name got called. He called me from the floor. "Dad," he said. "I'm almost there," I said. "I placed second," he said. "I know. Marcus texted me." A pause. "I lost the final," Noah said. "Yeah." "The kid who beat me was really good," he said. Marcus said he was excellent. "How was better than me," Noah said. And the way he said it without shame, without bitterness, with the clean assessment of someone who has learned to look at truth directly, was the single most mature thing I had heard him say in 16 years. "Yeah," I said. "Dad." "Yeah." "I want to get better," he said. "I know," I said. "Not to beat him, not specifically, just—" He paused. "I want to get better because getting better is the point. That's what you're supposed to want, right? Not the trophy, just the getting better." I was driving down a Texas highway at 70 miles an hour, with morning light on the road, and my son's voice in my ear, and I felt something that I do not have a clean word for. Something that was love and grief and relief and the particular devastating satisfaction of watching something you planted grow in the right direction. "Yeah," I said. "That's what you're supposed to want." Brandon said the same thing, Noah said. "This morning, before the tournament. He pulled me aside and he said the only thing that matters today is whether you competed honestly. And I thought—" He paused. "I thought, where was that 6 months ago?" "Different man 6 months ago," I said. "Are people really that changeable?" Noah said. Genuine question. Not cynicism. Genuine curiosity about the nature of people. I thought about Brandon on the phone. I thought about Devin leading the warm-up. I thought about Marcus in my driveway reporting back doing the small quiet work of paying attention. I thought about myself 11 years in the Navy and 10 years in a small town, and the whole long project of becoming someone I could recognize. "Yes," I said. "If they want to be. It's the wanting that's rare, not the ability." A pause. "Are you okay?" he said. The question he always asked now. "I'm in the truck," I said. "I'll be there in 30 minutes." "That's not what I asked," he said. I smiled. "Yeah, Noah," I said. "I'm okay." I drove the rest of the way with the radio off and the windows down and the Texas morning doing what Texas mornings do, burning bright and clean and indifferent and beautiful all at once. I walked into the tournament venue while they were handing out the second-place medals. Noah was on the floor, sweaty and alive, the medal around his neck, and when he saw me walk in, he did not wave or call out or do anything theatrical. He just nodded, and I nodded back, and that was enough. That was the whole thing right there in 2 nods across a gymnasium floor. Every fight and every locked door and every board meeting and every phone call and every breakfast and every push-up through the wall. All of it compressed into the 2-second language of a father and son, who know each other well enough that words are just the long version. I sat in the bleachers. Marcus sat down next to me. "He did good," Marcus said. "He did," I said. "Second place," Marcus said. "At his first tournament, after a knee injury, after everything." Yeah, I said. "You must be proud," Marcus said. I watched my son on the floor below talking to the kid who had beaten him, laughing about something. The easy laugh of 2 people who have just competed hard and come out the other side with respect for each other. "I've been proud of him every day since he was born," I said. "Today's just a day I got to see it from the bleachers." Marcus looked at me. "You're a good dad," he said. 17 years old, and he said it with the directness of someone who means it and knows it matters. "I try," I said. "My dad left when I was 9, Marcus said. Not bitterly, just as a fact offered in the honest space of the moment. I looked at him. "I know," I said, because Noah had told me once quietly the way he told me things he thought I should know. "I've been training with Brandon since I was 14, Marcus said. And I think for a while he was feeling something. I'm not blaming him for everything. I went there wanting something and he gave me a version of it." He paused. "I think I wanted someone who was sure, who knew what they were doing, who had it figured out." "Does that still feel like what you need?" I asked. He thought about it. "No," he said. "Now I think I want someone who's honest about what they don't have figured out, and keeps going anyway." I looked at the floor below at Noah laughing with the kid who beat him. "That's the better model," I said. "Yeah," Marcus said. We sat in the bleachers together for a while after that without talking, which is the particular companionship of people who have been through something real together and don't need to narrate it. Eventually, Noah came up to the bleachers and sat on the other side of me. He had the medal around his neck. He didn't mention it. He looked at the floor below where the next round was starting smaller kids now, 8 and 9 years old, throwing punches with the enormous, earnest imprecision of children who are learning something new and love it. "I want to come back next year," he said. "Okay," I said. "I want to win it next year," he said. "Okay," I said. "Is that the right thing to want?" he said. I looked at him. "Wanting to win is fine," I said. "As long as you know it's not the only thing that counts." "What else counts?" he said. I looked at the 8-year-olds on the floor below, learning to throw punches, learning to fall, learning to get up, learning the whole complicated, honest project of becoming stronger than they were yesterday. "How you got there," I said. "Whether you were honest along the way. Whether the people around you are better for having trained with you." I paused. "Whether the winning means something because of what it took, not just because of what it proves." Noah looked at the floor. "Brandon told me something this morning," he said. "Before the tournament. He said the strongest person in any room isn't the one who can do the most damage. It's the one who knows exactly how much damage to do and stops there." I was quiet. "Did he say where he heard that?" I said. Noah looked at me. "He said a mechanic told him," he said, and I laughed. Not a small laugh. A real one from somewhere deep and undefended. The laugh of a man who has spent a long time being serious and finds the genuine funny thing genuinely funny. Noah watched me laugh with the slightly alarmed expression of a teenager watching a parent have a big feeling in public. Then he laughed too, and Marcus, who had caught the end of it, looked at both of us and said, "What?" with the confused patience of someone outside a joke, and we couldn't explain it, and that made it better. That is the moment I will remember. Not the locked door, not the mat, not the board meeting, or the phone call, or the tournament medal, or any of the things that could be put in a story as the turning point, the climax, the place where everything changed. I will remember 2 people laughing in bleachers on a Saturday morning in Texas, one of them 16 and the other one 38, because of a stupid joke about a mechanic, because something that had been heavy for a long time had gotten light enough to laugh at, because my son was healthy and present, and becoming the person I always believed he was, because the work was ongoing, and the work was worth it, and the work was in the end just this. Showing up. Telling the truth. Stopping when enough was enough. And knowing, really knowing, not just hoping, but knowing that the strongest thing you can do in any room is choose exactly how much of yourself to use, and use exactly that much, and not 1 ounce more. That is what I knew. That is what I carried. That is what I gave my son, and he is going to carry it further than I ever did. That is the whole story, and it is enough.